Good afternoon. As it is 1 p.m., I will call this City Council workshop of November 20th, 2024 to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of city staff or consultants may be participating via teleconference. Today's meeting may be viewed on YouTube, Facebook, and following the meeting on cable channel 10 HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation on action items. We have no action items on our agenda today. I'd like to begin by thanking our staff, including Tom Wade for facilities maintenance, our fire and police departments, and our contractor Tim Shelley for their work in getting power and internet connections quickly restored to the City Hall during our City Council meeting last night, and for all of the work our city crews and first responders in assisting those impacted by last night's storm. With that, we will jump into our monthly department reports, and here to talk to us is our City Administrator, Sabrina Combs. Look lively.
Okay, so I do not have a presentation this month, but I do want to go over a couple of items from the report just to highlight for you as a council and the community. So the first item is under leadership. We are in the process of doing the escrow for the Goldie Road surplus property purchase. So we did take several meetings with Pastor Dean, walked her through the contract, talked about the different processes that she needed to take, and then she was working with the local title company to complete that transaction. So we are currently doing our paperwork side of that in the executive office. Then for legislative, I did attend the AWC Association of Washington Cities District 14 annual meeting. It was a really good time to hang out with other city representation, talk about different programs and things that they're working on, also talk about some of the similarities that we're all working towards and how we're achieving those. We all have a lot of the same challenges, and so it was nice to hear that. We also talked about some of our priorities, which I spoke to you about yesterday during the council meeting. Then for the board and commission vacancies, what we are still working on, we took your feedback from the last workshop and we are compiling those so that we can update those documents and get those out to the public. So that's just taking a little more work as we work through those changes and edits. In information technology, the city issued an RFP, what we call a request for proposal, for IT support services. That went out on October 12th. We did receive 4 responses by the required submission due date on November 12th. And so currently staff is going through those and evaluating those. They will be bringing back that information to you as a council. The long-range planning, you'll hear more from Kat Kamak today. So I'm going to leave that to him to present on and talk to you about. But we are really working hard to work with Island County and to address the needs for the Growth Management Act that's been coming to the city. Then under fire, the city received 4 bids for construction of Fire Station 82. The bids are under review by the consultant and staff, so we are very excited about that and the fact that the dollar amount for those bids came in with what we had anticipated. So any questions?
Any questions from council? All right, well, we're going to move on then to the next item, which is city council comments. Are there any city council comments in general? None? Okay. Then council calendar. Sabrina, you're going to present that as well.
Yes, so I figured I'd just stay here and do that. Okay, so the 2025 council calendar, we have a presentation for this. Okay, thank you, Tim. So the objective here is that, just to give you some background, this is the municipal code that talks about the requirements of the calendar and when we have to have that done, and some of the requirements of what we've already have in the current calendar, that you meet on the first Tuesday of each month, It also talks about official holidays and how we handle that, and then getting the calendar done. So we know we have the municipal code. We also have your council rule of procedure that was amended with Resolution 2422 that set the regular meeting times. It does not include your workshops. City council, as you know, adopts a calendar for the following year each year, and then that decides how we're going to handle our meetings going forward. Some council members, though, have inquired about potentially moving the council workshops from Wednesday to Tuesday. So we just want to make sure that we're talking about that as a group. And then staff has identified some council dates they would like to recommend the council consider moving as well. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go through this list. So this is the current 2024 calendar that was in your packet. This calendar highlights some of the things that we typically include our council meetings and workshops, holiday office closures, AWC action days and conferences, the NLC conference, the employee events that we have, National Night Out, summer concert series, and then election days. So some of the items that we want to discuss today are there any changes or requested changes that you as a council have for your council meetings? Is there anything in the city council workshop? Like I said, we've heard that some people are considering moving the workshop from Wednesday to Tuesday. And then potentially, does the time work? Just making sure if we're making changes that we're considering that as well. And then something that always comes up as we talk about this is the summer schedule. Are there any changes that you want to make to that? So then some of the staff recommendations that we have is this November week is really tough. We're getting ready for a holiday. We have multiple dates. We do both a council meeting and a workshop, which can be challenging. So what we were suggesting is possibly, and then we don't have a workshop at all in December. So the suggestion is, do we modify both for the election and this dual week by changing those dates around? And so we move November 4th election week to meeting on November 11th and then hold one workshop on November 18th. So there's one meeting, one workshop in November, and then potentially changing December to have one workshop and one regular meeting on December 9th and 16th. So again, this is just a suggestion. Nope.
Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
Well, let's back up. I mean, because Councilmember Marshall did ask for the workshops to be moved to Wednesday. Tuesday, I apologize. I mean, for me personally, Wednesday's a little bit better, but that's not to say it's not to say I can't do Tuesday. And I'm curious how everyone else thinks about that.
Councilmember Wittgenstein.
I'm kind of in the same boat. Wednesdays are already kind of block free, but I have that flexibility to be able to shift it to Tuesday. As long as we have enough notice, if we're talking about starting the first of the year or something, that's fine with me.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll do whatever to try and help accommodate. The only thing, for Tim and I, the move to the fourth Wednesday of the month is we'll have back-to-back workshop and planning commission. But like I told Councilmember Marshall, if that assisted his schedule, I'd certainly be willing to do that. Another option would be whether or not we wanted to, if we're going to go to a Tuesday, do it on the second Tuesday instead of the fourth Tuesday. But again, I'm innocuous to either, whatever benefits the rest of the council.
Yes, Councilmember Arms.
Well, as you all know, I'm flexible. And very flexible, unfortunately. But because I think it's really important that we have as many council members as possible for our workshop. And I do think that council member, like everybody, brings a lot to the table. So I do think that we should shift it to Tuesday. But you guys decide what you want to do, because, but otherwise he won't be able to come, and we can do it in January. And that's how I feel.
Do we have Mayor Pro Tem? Yay. So Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my schedule is pretty flexible too. If moving workshops from Wednesdays to Tuesdays would better accommodate Councilmember Marshall or anybody else, I'm flexible. That works for me. We can make that happen.
Yeah, Councilmember Stuckey.
I guess last question regarding at least that part, is there an effect on staff? I mean, would it make any difference to the majority of staff who need to be here?
I mean, I have staff behind.
I mean, is there any
Hold the
staff members
audience.
who think that would be an imposition to be difficult to accommodate? Going once.
The one thing that I will say is we did have a conversation if, since we're already looking at some of the advisory boards, what we could do is revisit that as well for some of those groups, because maybe this allows us to functionally look at those as well, just as an open conversation.
Yeah, and that might make, because the planning commission meetings, are they at 6 or 7? 6. Because I would hate to feel like we need to wrap up a workshop for that, and I don't want to keep moving the workshop time. I don't want to say, oh, we're going to now try 11 o'clock or so. So,
Right.
you know, I don't have an objection to it being on a Tuesday that's not at the same time as, I just don't want us to be rushed, so they need to have their time too, so.
And we as staff appreciate you talking this over with us, because drafting this calendar does take a lot of work, and so we wanted to make sure that we were having this conversation in advance before we create that first draft.
Do you need, like, this is a workshop, you don't need a vote or anything?
No,
do
we
you?
just needed some feedback to understand what you guys were looking towards.
Okay.
So, but we're starting workshops at 1, correct?
Currently, yes.
And then we're saying the planning commission wouldn't start until 6. Are we really going longer than 5 hours in a workshop?
Don't jinx us.
I'm not,
Yeah, way to go. You know what's gonna happen.
We have in the past.
no, I mean, it was just a question. I mean, it seems like that would be a reasonable amount of time, though, to.
It's,
I mean-
it's a rarity, but it has happened.
Okay. Well, I was just, I mean, and we have some control over that with scheduling, though, how much we're putting into a workshop, right?
We do, and it also depends on how much we discuss an item and things like that. So
Yeah,
there's
I get it.
variables in
Yes,
that.
I understand, but 5 hours seems like a, okay.
Have we, sorry,
Yeah.
another question. Have we checked, external schedules? Would Tuesday afternoon interfere with, like, Board of Health or Council
will.
of Government or anything like that?
So one of the challenges we have currently is there are some other island counting meetings that are currently difficult for mayor to attend, that with the workshop right now. There are, and some of our staff, because those meetings take place earlier in the day on a workshop day. And so we've not been able to attend in person, and actually moving away from Wednesday would be nice for that, because that does also allow for networking and engagement with other municipalities on the island and island county staff. There may be other meetings, but I think unfortunately every date we pick, there might be something, if I'm honest about our schedules. So I think it's just a decision of which meetings do we have that priority with, and where we want to have that engagement.
Yeah, and for the meetings I'm generally not able to attend in person, I prepare something and submit to those boards or those meetings, and that way I still have a voice on whatever the issues are after I read the packets and prepare that, so.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like there's a number of reasons why moving from Wednesday to Tuesday might work out. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Is there a reason, does it matter whether it's the 2nd or 4th Tuesday of the month?
I mean, we have it in our code, so that's one of the things with looking at the code that we were considering.
So we would have to change the code.
But we would bring that back as part of the proposal with the item for action.
Okay.
So there would be a draft schedule with probably the code changed, is what you're saying?
We would have the draft calendar as well
I'm sorry,
as the
yeah, that's
proposed
what I
code
meant,
change,
calendar.
yes.
Okay. Does that sound good to all of you? Okay.
Okay, and then I'm just gonna let you know of one other thing that we've realized that we want to make sure. There will also be a code change noted because of the time for packets being completed. It's not something that as a city that we typically do our packets by a certain time at end of day, and that 5 days ahead. So we're just making sure that it matches with the code that we have. So we're also gonna see that code revision as well. So
Great.
any other questions?
Yes, Councilmember Stuckey?
So we went back, you then made a comment about, like, this meeting today.
What about this meeting today? I'm sorry.
In the future, so next year about having the
Oh.
meeting. So can you go back to that? Because
Yeah.
we kind of backed up, and I want to make sure I understood what you.
So what happened this month, for example, we watched, so with the election day, yes, we moved the meeting one day, but everybody is still focused on the election and what's happening with the election. So we realized it may be better to have that meeting the following week so that we can actually be out of that election period. So that's a recommendation. The other thing is that then we, like this week, we had both a meeting and a workshop. So maybe what we do is just hold one meeting and one workshop in November, one meeting and one workshop in December. And that's what these suggested dates are providing. So it is just a recommendation based on the workload, because a lot of times when we're trying to get those packets ready 5 days out, we're coming out of a meeting and trying to get the next item done. And sometimes you're giving us direction and we have very little time to be reactive to those items. So we're just trying to think about how to do this strategically to provide more time.
So I like the idea of leaving the more meetings, and then I've seen in the past where we voted to cancel a meeting, because that way it's mentally blocked off. I mean, I'd rather us we have so much, we got to go over it and have those there than, oh my gosh, we took that meeting off, we need to catch up. So I'm for leaving the meetings on there and then voting to remove them when we get closer if there's not enough going on with the city.
Okay.
Good? And, okay, yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Just kind of thinking about that through the November, have we always moved it off Election Day?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's in the code.
yeah. Because I actually showed up that night. That was a me problem, yeah.
You were really putting me fine.
So I'm kind of with Stuckey. I'd rather have the dates blocked out versus trying to schedule
A special meeting.
a special meeting and being able to cancel one if we need to. Because we already do a modified summer schedule. And then we modify December a little bit. I would hate to see us modify another month. I just feel like we'd be setting ourselves up to be cutting ourselves short in time frame. If we don't need it, we cancel it. I like that approach.
Okay, that's why we were just providing an option.
Mayor Pro Tem, you good with all of that? I can't see
I
you.
am.
Okay, sorry, just checking in. All right, well, thank you, Sabrina. I think that concludes that
Perfect, thank
topic.
you.
We will move on to development services, and we will have a presentation on our 2025 comprehensive plan major update, future land use map, and survey results. And here to talk to us is our principal planner, Kak Kamak.
Good afternoon. I will just make some opening remarks and hand it over to our consultant who's online and have a presentation on the survey. So I know the topic reads that we have for discussion of future land use map and survey results. I will come back and talk about the future land use map and the status of that. We don't have a map in your packet to review, but we are working on one, and I'll talk about that, and I'll work with the county once we're done with the presentation on the survey results. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron Kelly with our consultant, Kimley Horn, and you can use the share screen to do a presentation if you'd like. Or we have slides here too, if you'd like, we can do it that way. The audio, if you can hear us, the audio is broken. It's coming broken up.
Do we want to come back
Yeah.
to this topic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since we're having technical difficulties, we're going to see if we can postpone.
Yeah,
that
no
and come
worries.
back.
So we will move forward with
These are different.
the Parks and Recreation and the future of the marina. And here to introduce that is our Parks and Recreation Director, Brian Smith, and our Harbor Master, Chris Sublett. Sorry. Where did I skip? It's not on here. Yeah, it's not on my script. That's what I'm.
Master fee.
All right, so we have the master fee schedule. Who's here to present on that? All right, that's Mikhail.
No, that's okay. That's usually me. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the master fee schedule. And typically, the master fee schedule, we review it annually and bring changes to council as needed. Typically, the departments come to workshop and discuss the individual items with you before. This year, we have all of the departments here and are submitting one master fee. Will be submitting a master fee change. And it won't change. No, it's on my computer. I need some IT assistance. I got it. Okay. Okay. So what was included in your packet, I did include the entire master fee schedule as it's currently adopted, just for reference, because there are some schedules that we are not proposing changes to. That would be the Schedule C for fire, Schedule E for police, Schedule F for public works, and then the public records addendum. The impact fees will be reviewed with a consultant in 2025, so we didn't propose any changes. Deputy City Administrator Goldman can provide a little bit more information on that project.
Sure. So the city currently uses 2 impact fees to pay for new and expanded public capital facilities that directly address the increased demand for services created by new development, parks and transportation. Parks impact fees were first initiated in 1996, and transportation impact fees were first initiated in 1997. The parks impact fees were updated in 2006 via Ordinance 1473. There's also been various other ordinances that affected impact fees, but didn't really change the rates much at all. So generally, the rates that we're charging out for the parks and transportation improvements based on new development haven't changed for decades. During this time, there's been changes to state law that requires impact fees to be scalable, meaning, charged based on the size of the unit, or, either it's a unit for residential or non-residential development. And in addition, impact fees can be designed to take into account differential rates to encourage affordable housing and stuff like that. State law also permits fees to be collected to help pay for new and expanded public capital facilities for fire and also for schools. So we went out to bid a few months ago just to see what was available for consultants who know about impact fees, to take a look at the impact fees, and we'll be bringing the council the results of that RFP and the bidder that was selected in front of council for approval for a contract for them to study these the two existing impact fees that we have, and also to look into the possibility of a fire and a schools type impact fee as well. And they also have some data from the AWC. I'll be including, there's no reason to go over that right now because you don't have it in front of you, and most of these charts are very visually based. So I'll be including those charts in the item that we bring in front of council next month. So there you go.
Thank you. So additionally, what was in your packet then are schedules for the departments where we are requesting or proposing changes. I can go over them generally, and then all the departments have representatives here if things need to be discussed in more detail. So first, we're starting with Schedule A, which is Development Services. Their fees were generally adjusted by 3%. Some of the things that were changed are the permit fee for street openings. That will now be covered as a right-of-way excavation. That's just, I think it's clarifying, makes it easier for the folks pulling the permit. Grading permits will now include the land clearing. Water service connections are being adjusted, and then there are some housekeeping items with the system development charges and the zoning district appeals by removing fees for 23-24, and then the zoning district appeals. It appears that when some of those functions went to the hearing examiner, the code was changed, but the fees were taken out of the master fee schedule. So there aren't appeals in that section.
Also, I'd like to mention too that the land development fees were also rounded to like the nearest $5 or the nearest dollar, depending on the amount of the fee. So, we're trying to avoid these odd numbers with cents and things like that, trying to just make it more manageable to help out, our customers who have to pay the fees, so.
Thank you. And then also included with development services, there are building fees. Building permit fees are set by state code, so we didn't propose any changes to them. There were some formatting, housekeeping, text changes. So, is there any questions on development services fees?
Nope. You good, Brian? Yes, Councilmember Wisner.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, one change I do like is, we're working more towards the charge actual cost for the big development stuff. We've taken now and we've got a deposit we're collecting. We charge a fee and then we charge by the hour above that. And I've always thought that made more sense, right? Because we had several projects that the city, quite frankly, subsidized through plan review fees, and we were spending more on doing them than we were receiving. At the same time, the folks who came in with straightforward, well put together, well proposed projects were being penalized by being charged a fee that was, kind of subsidizing the ones that weren't so easy. So I'm glad to see that happen, and I actually do agree with the concept of rounding these things. I noticed as I was going through it that it wasn't just an exact 3%. I will say that I'm going to be consistent, however, in my deal, to to just go across the board and always be raising fees by a percentage because we can, just never makes sense to me. Not to just do it consistently. I mean, I like the fact that we're relooking at some of our impact fees and stuff. I think that needs to be kind of a challenge for us each year, that we need to take segments of each of these budgets, and rather than just do an across-the-board increase, we need to look at those areas that we can tweak. And then every couple of years, if we're doing cost of living per se, or cost of doing business adjustments, it's okay. But to just constantly just stack another 3% every year after year, and not sit down and really take a look at how our technology is helping us or hurting us, how code changes. For example, David pointed out the fact that we're supposed to be charging some of these impact fees based upon size of project, which is the direction we went with our connection fees, right? The smaller projects should be paying less than the larger projects. That's the type of stuff, as long as we keep doing that, I'll be content with these, kind of across the board raises, as long as we're kind of constantly looking at how we can refine these, provide as good or better quality service to our clients, and be doing it at the best price possible, but at the same time, not be subsidizing them. I like that we've made some changes. This isn't, we just didn't go through and just change the prices. We've actually removed some areas, we've added some areas, we've adjusted some areas, and I really appreciate staff's time and effort on that, and something hopefully we can do each and every year, and then we can kind of stay on top of these fees and not find ourselves going, oh boy, we really took it in the shorts on that one, because we hadn't updated that fee for a long time and hadn't realized that project was going to be that way. And at the same time, we don't want to be discouraging people from coming in here, doing the right thing, getting the permit to do the job, all because we're charging some absorbent fee that, should be a lot simpler than this. So appreciate all that. Thank you.
Anyone else? I can't see Mayor Pro Tem. We're good? Okay. Well, there's nothing else. Thank you very much to both of you.
Nope, we still got several.
Oh, you're,
things to go.
sorry.
That was the first thing.
So the second schedule is finance and utilities. One change there was to clarify the charge for after hours. It currently said 5 PM. As we know, our public works staff, we have different schedules. So we clarified that for after hours, weekend, and holidays to turn water back on. The next one is special events. This is located in the finance section. So I've been doing special events since 2021. That special event permitting is now changing to Parks and Recreation starting next year. But special event staff over, as long as I can remember, would like to review what we charge for special events. Currently, the permit fee is $50. And so we are proposing a couple different fees, a standard permit fee and a low impact. We have our special events code says that over 50 people in a park is a special event that has to be processed. It's not much administrative work, but we still have to go through the same process as if we were permitting a larger event. These would be things like command picnics that the Navy has. So we are proposing that there be a low impact fee for those type of events, and then a standard permit fee for the ones that are more involved, the big community events where you have to have staff from departments gather for planning meetings to review the events ahead of time, and just all the details that go into that. Another thing that we have talked about is having standard parade routes and standard street closures. Sometimes when we get into the permitting process, every year an event is slightly tweaking something, and it takes a lot to change that on the staff side. So we would like to propose some standardization next year, giving options for 2 parades and then a variety of street closures. So in the schedule, you will see the costs, the standard permit fee will go from $50 to $100. The low impact fee will stay at $50. And then what is listed there for the parade route and street closures, that's actual streets costs. You can see it ranges from $600 to $1,800 to close streets for some of our bigger events. A lot of them are in the summertime during staff's busiest time. We pay overtime because they're most of the time on weekends or the streets being closed and opened after hours. I don't think that we can get a full cost recovery, but we need some direction from the council as how we can best partner, but also, support these special events. So that's kind of the big topic for this schedule.
Tucky.
So I don't personally have an issue with the special event permitting. I think, going from 50 to 100, I don't think that that's something that cause people not to do that. Obviously, the concern is the parade. So I believe, looking at the fee, and there's a lot of fees here, so correct me if I'm wrong, $1,400 if you're going to close two of our main streets, essentially, like the 4th of July parade.
Well, that's what it's actually costing us.
I understand that.
For the street.
So that's not what you're proposing.
Represent the average cost to close for those events.
What do we charge now?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, so you're not.
Right now, we're only I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
standard, the application fee is the only, not the only charge, but.
Because, obviously, you look at our bigger parades especially, and we definitely don't want to see those go away. We don't want to lose the 4th of July parade. We don't want to lose the Holland Happening or Culture Festival parade. Have we reached out to, say, the chamber to ask what they think is a reasonable rate of what they could handle?
No, we hadn't done that.
Because that would be something I think would be fairly important. I mean, some of that I think they could get from charging a little bit more for their entries. I look at the 4th of July parade, that's sometimes like a 2-hour parade, Maybe political candidates get charged a little bit more to walk out there with signs. So there's ways they can recover those costs to help pay, but I think it would be prudent for us to reach out to those that we know do those major events, those major parades, and see what can be stomached. Because I agree, we definitely need to charge something, but, if it were the full cost recovery, which I understand we're not implying, that would be detrimental to that, and I don't know if it would still occur. So I'm for charging something, but we definitely need to reach out to those entities and try to get a realistic feel of what can be stomached, I think. So, appreciate it.
Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, so I'm in lines of, so right now, when we shut down Pioneer for the 4th of July weekend, we don't charge for that road to be shut down,
Correct.
correct? And it costs us roughly, you say $1,400 just to shut it down? Or is that per day?
No, with the streets, they shut it down and then they reopen it, so.
Right, so it's
for
just the cost
weekend, yeah,
It's just the man hours essentially to, okay.
yeah, so I don't think a per day.
So I think we're looking at a couple of things, right? Because when we have a festival with booths spread out over the street, we're closing it for the weekend. With the parade, so I think there's different fees involved if we're going to do fees. If we're going to go to the chamber and see what, maybe we look at a percentage of what they get off of booth rentals, because I know they raised their booth rates. Last year at the 4th of July, it was much higher than it had been previously. I say much, but so maybe we're looking at a percentage versus a flat rate so that it's flexible with the amount that they sell. And if they have 50 booths at $300 a pop, there's a percentage of that would cover, hopefully come back to us to help eliminate some of those costs that we put out in order to open and close the roads. So, but yeah, we definitely have to have something in there, I think, at least as a nominal token of contribution. So I'm in favor of doing something along those lines.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor.
Especially this, you guys.
I lost it, but they have parades and stuff broke out. So my concern would be some of the smaller parades, like the Irish Wildlife. You know, I can't imagine them scraping together $800 for a parade closure. That would be a parade that would probably go away. You know, I don't know that that's a organization that raises money all year long to put that parade on. I don't know that they even charge to be in that parade. The parade for the high school graduates, right? Homecoming parade, right? You know, so those are the concerns there. So first off, I would say that if we did anything for, and I get the whole concept behind recouping, but I would suggest that we make sure that we have a waiver process in place, a letter to the mayor requesting a waiver for those fees, and the ability to get that granted, right? There's always going to be exceptions, right? And we have to make sure we're set for those exceptions, that we're not discouraging tradition, we're not discouraging the kids from getting out on homecoming and having some good, clean fun, rather than going out and having a kegger out in the woods, right? So I would want to see that. I would want to see some sort of a fairly simple waiver process where and I get it's going to be discretionary, and I think, quite frankly, it should be the mayor. But the other concern I would have is thinking through the process of doing a special event in the city. You know, if we're going to charge, you know, to recoup the expected costs, we're going to have to come up with a fairly stable plan to be able to answer the cost of that fee very quickly up front in the concept of an event. I mean, right now, you know, we're issuing these special event permits just, you know, typically days before the event, and there's a reason for that, because the events morph, and, you know, we've all learned by this, and you've done a great job, especially in the summer, you know, because that's where the bulk of the events are coming, and, you know, all the volunteers and stuff wait till the last minute to turn the stuff in. I know exactly what you're going through, but picture the fact that now, before somebody even can plan an event or budget for an event, they're going to come to you and they're going to say, okay, what's it going to cost me? That's going to be a tough one, right? Again, that's going to be even more manpower, right? To actually sit down before an event application is even submitted, per se, to be able to answer the question of what it's going to cost to put the event on, because otherwise we're submitting applications for events, and then, you know, what happens if we get told, you know, 2 months before the event, okay, it's going to cost you $9,000 for city reimbursements, and you find that out 2 months before the event. I mean, that's not going to work. So I'm just thinking logistically for our standpoint, you know, how do we do that? How do we sit down and say, okay, here's all the fees associated with your event before we even have an application in? So that's going to be the challenge. I don't have the answer, so hopefully you weren't looking for me for that. But I think that's the challenge we're going to have. How do you nail down, you know, and I get it, you know, we've got garbage costs for some events, we've got police for some events, we've got, you know, extra street patrols on for some events. You know, how do you figure out ahead what all an event's going to need, give them some sort of a rough quote or a rough idea, and then how do you put on an event without that rough idea, you know, without being able to establish a budget. So challenges, and I'm sorry I don't have answers for you, but I just kind of wanted to think some of that through for you. In the end, yeah, there's a cost to closing streets, there's a cost of putting on parades, and I think we're just going to have to establish what that is worth to the city, and we're going to have to put the number on it, but I think we need to have the ability for, you know, the mayor or somebody in control to use their conscious judgment and say, you know, this is something that is benefit for the city, it's something that, you know, makes the community a better place to live, and it's something that is a duty of the city to absorb the cost for that particular event so that it can go on, because I'd hate to see some of the smaller stuff that, especially, you know, like you look at the Irish parade, it's kind of the first parade of the season, right? It's off season, right? It's kind of the start to spring, right? And to have something like that just die on the vine over a few $100, you know, I hate to see that happen.
Okay. And yeah, I want to say, part of this is setting those stages. So we would have a large parade route and a small parade route. They would pick, and then the fee would be associated, so we don't have to do this like every, what do you want, what do you want? And same with the street closure. We'd have, these are a small, medium, large, or however we title them, street closures, so we would have that up front published and say, okay, yes, this is what it costs.
Yeah, it's the rest of that in there later on where it talks about the fee varying, right, for the, other issues, right, fire, police, garbage,
Oh.
et cetera, that I was kind of talking about. I think we can obviously establish the street closure costs, right, but then what other charges are the city going to charge to an event that takes place to recoup other costs? Because it kind of insinuates in this chart that that's something that we're looking at.
So a lot of the other things, sanitation, we already charge for that. Hydrants and water usage, we charge those. So we do have some other fees already established for those things. Overtime for police, and so some of those are already established, but we don't have them all in one place. So, yes, thank you.
Councilmember Arms.
Doesn't Main Street do some of the things downtown for closures?
Yes, they're an event organizer for a lot of the
I
downtown
mean, maybe
events.
we should ask them and the chamber, to include those people that we know, and maybe list, the things we already know that we're going to do, different parades, there's always things that pop up, and then see where they're at, what they can afford or what they're willing to do, and maybe have a meeting or something with them to kind of include them, that they don't all of a sudden get this surprise package and, find it in their package, so they know ahead of time. I mean, I know that's a lot of work, but, kind of organizing somebody from each group and saying, this is what we're thinking, this is why, and maybe kind of giving them a heads up instead of just there,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Stuckey.
Well, we're all just throwing out thoughts, so why not add a couple more? Maybe something for, yeah, right? Larger organizations versus smaller organizations. I mean, kind of what Councilmember Weiser was leading to, obviously the chamber could probably stomach more than the Irish Wildlife Society. So maybe the size of the organization, or I look at, the challenge series for the Rotary Club. I mean, something like that makes $1,500, that would be pretty detrimental to. I do have an issue with one individual being the person who makes the exception or not. I mean, you say that's the mayor, okay. So our current mayor makes an exception. Well, the next mayor has then a pickle. Either they continue that, or they don't, and they're the bad guy. So welcome to politics. So I don't know if I like the idea of, if you were going to have an exception if you're going to have an exception process, I don't think I like the idea of one individual being the one who makes that call. I'm not suggesting it comes to council, but, maybe something based on the size of the organization or dollars it brings in, if any. Things like that, I think, should be considerations. But having one person be the exception or non-exception, it's a very tough spot to be in. So, yeah, well, I do understand simplicity as well. So, thank you.
So, Mikhail, I think you're already doing this, but it sounds like minor versus major event, and then have costs associated with those two different types of categories. And I will just say, as a past president of the Chamber of Commerce, all they're going to do is pass this cost on to whoever the participants are in the event. So we can't get hung up too much on those things. I think that we need to look at whatever we are trying to do as a city, whatever percentage we're trying to recoup, and go with that, and just keep that in mind. I don't think it's going to be too exorbitant for them to absorb. I think it's going to be fine. But again, those are my 2 cents too. So, because we can get lost in the weeds with asking, you're going to get, so. So again, minor versus major event, and then keep your costs associated with those two types of events, because obviously, like they're saying, we don't want to charge a small organization the huge cost that we would be charging a larger organization. And again, the larger organizations and events are they're going to pass on those fees to whoever the participants are. So my only 2 cents for the parade, though, is if we're going to continue to go down Pioneer, we have got to do something better about getting kids off the street, because that was terrifying to drive down that parade route this year, and constantly be worrying about running over a kid's foot or leg. So, for me, anyway. So, anything else? I did not say that. We've got to keep them back off the street. No, I just want to keep them back off the street more. It was treacherous for a while. I couldn't even imagine driving a fire truck, so.
Yeah, and staff does recognize that. That's why some of the parade routes we want to be a small parade will go Pioneer the correct way, just for flow of traffic and help out with the street closure. And then anything over a certain size, we're going to require go down Bay Shore.
Yeah, it
It's
was
not safe.
it was a lot, so. All right, is
So
that?
we will come back
keep-
with that.
Still a couple more.
schedule.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, I think, yeah, definitely want to come back with that, so. And I have some ideas written down too, so.
Okay. Next schedule is the marina. Some of that, you'll see housekeeping, removing the 23-24 rates. And then there are just a couple special case moorage for organizations, clubs, and groups, and then for patios and upland areas. The Marina Advisory Committee was scheduled to discuss this yesterday, but the meeting had to be rescheduled to early to December. So I don't know if there's any questions about the proposed rates, but we'll have a recommendation from the MAC when we bring this back. Good? All right. Section G is going to be Parks and Recreation. This is where you will see some updates or revisions, increases to the park facility reservations for the kitchens. We've also defined the field use for not leagues, just members of the public, should they want to use that. Finance developed a staff billable rate, if we need that for events or for other instances. Then there's a section for reservation of the fields for the leagues. That was, the methodology on that was changed from a per participant to a per hour charge for the league use. And then we have special events if they were to use one of the fields. One thing we did add for that is an open space. Currently, right now, if there's an event held in the park, if they don't rent a kitchen or a shelter, there's no fee established, so we don't charge anything for the use of the park. So we did add an open space. And then we'd like to possibly consider public entity use for like official government business. Currently, the code doesn't allow the mayor or staff to waive any fees associated with the special events. So we do have things like the high school and the middle school do use Fort Nugent Park for a track meet. And if they had more than 50 people, they'd be required to go through the special event permit process and pay the fee for that. So that's an example of government use.
There's
So-
also a military appreciation picnic. Councilmember Wiesner.
Sorry, I'm gonna back real quick like to the marina, real quick like. I'm sorry, I just have to jump in and say the timing of thinking about charging any additional special event fees at the marina is just terrible timing. This is the time that we should be hosting as many special events at the marina as we possibly can. This is the time that we should be getting as many citizens down to the marina and enjoying it as we possibly can. This is the time we should be working with any organization, and I'm going to say, yes, I'm heavily involved with Hydros, and the reason Hydros holds the event there is because we're happy to co-host it with the marina, because it benefits the marina. It's not an event that we have to use. In fact, the reality is we'd be better off using Pioneer Way for the VIP dens because they're easier to serve. It's a real pain going out there to FDOC, but it brings people into the marina, and the marina's just a fantastic co-host of that event, and they get to claim being a co-host of that event. And I just think we're not thinking straight when it comes to marina right now. Here it is. It's a top discussion of how do we get the community behind what we're going to do with the marina. We get the community behind that by getting the community down there to use that marina and realize it's an asset to everybody in the community. And we're not going to do that by all of a sudden now, right, when we need to make a few $100s off of fees. I think the few $100s we're going to make off of any fees is going to be so anti the other direction of getting the community involved that we really need to think about that. That's my thoughts on that. Windjammer Park, going from $50 for kitchen A, which, let's face it, the kitchens have no heat. I think we're getting heat though. For going from $50 to $150, how are we figuring? What's the rental amount that we're seeing in that kitchen now? Are we seeing a pretty good capacity at $50?
Yeah, it's fairly heavily used, and it also requires quite a bit of cleanup between rentals. They're pretty much booked out during the summertime.
Okay.
And as you alluded to, yeah, we're going to be increasing the amenities in those as well. So.
Okay, so this is going to go directly to making those better units. Okay, yeah, I just, apprehensive, anytime we're charging a fee to citizens, who contribute to the tax base to use facilities, right? And so I'm just going to express that. I realize, we do have costs and et cetera, and we either cover it through this way, or we cover it through diminished maintenance elsewhere, or we cover it through increased fees elsewhere. But I'm just going to keep a real close eye on this. And really, Brian, what I'd like to see, is maybe, a breakdown at the end of the year of, what fees we'd collected before and what kind of use we'd had before, and then make sure that we're not diminishing use, right? I mean, you get it. We raised fees by 30%, and we have 30% diminished use, and what did we accomplish?
We track that, include that in your monthly report.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see that over time, and we show usage.
Yeah, we'd like to get it maybe a year to year, like year end to year end, at the end of the year, and that way when we revisit this, we make sure that we're not just diminishing use, right, and flatlining, right? If we're collecting the same amount of money and just less people are using it, that certainly isn't what you want to achieve. I know by it.
To your point, there is a price elasticity, with any kind of amenity like that. But we also did a comparable to the market. What are other municipalities that offer a similar facility? What are they charging? And this is right in line with that. So we feel pretty comfortable at the rate we're setting that.
Well, and again, it's something that's trackable, right? We can actually look back and see how it affected, and so I'm okay with giving anything a try that we can put something tangible on. But hopefully you do get my concerns with the marina. I think that's heading the wrong direction to the direction that we need to be going over the next 2 or 3 years, which is to get as much community involvement as possible.
That's why we have the conversation with you guys of what's your methodology? What's the cost recovery that you would like to see? You need to help us set that. We can meet that, but it's a balance between participation and revenue flow, right? And where's that comfortable zone for you and the public?
Yeah, and the reality is that it's our comfortable zone, I think, is the public's comfortable zone, right? When like I say, when we start seeing diminished use, because of increased fees, and then that's always a concern, because I know deep down that that's not what you're going for, and so, I just ask that we keep an eye on it and make sure that we're achieving what we're trying to achieve, which is to increase the quality of our facilities, right, and make them available to the public, and I know that's your goal.
We'll take that feedback and we'll have some more discussions and make some revisions if we need to there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so really quickly before I let you go next, just to also say on Brian's behalf, one of the things that, we've tasked them with is looking at cost recovery, and making them accountable. So that's also what they were attempting to do with what they've proposed here. So they're trying to bring back to council what they feel like has been communicated to them as an expectation. So
The balancing act.
yeah. So Councilmember Stuckey.
I guess I'm a couple questions, but I'm a little confused about the open spaces. I mean, am I to understand then if I decide to invite 20 of my friends to the playground, I'm now going to have to pay a fee?
You will if you would like exclusive use of that space, so closed off or a private event or something like that.
Is that common that someone says, I want that playground equipment exclusively?
Not very common, but it does happen, yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, first of all, how do you police that sort of a thing?
Yeah, we put up signage that there's a reservation there, right?
Okay, all
Not
right.
with, not, the example of the playground, that doesn't really happen very often with like a playground, but we have other spaces within parks where people want to do that, or they want to do a business activity in the park, right? So there's triggers of if it's a certain size, if it's a business activity where they are getting revenue or charging for use,
okay.
or if it's an exclusive use, say like a club that's doing a drone race or something like that, right? And there's not if it doesn't neatly fit within our specific sports fields, then that open space fee would apply.
Okay, that makes sense. Explain a little bit to me, because I'm trying to compare. Right now, for the leagues, is like a per player, it sounded like. What does that typically come out to? I'm trying to compare if this is a huge increase, a small increase, or a moderate increase.
It was a decrease when we first presented it to David. So we had we're still working with the numbers, but across the board, it's about a 34% increase between all the fees.
Okay. Do we currently charge for the on-site storage?
No, we do not.
Do we charge currently for the concession stand?
Nope.
Okay.
The concession stand does have a cost to the city, and we just absorb that cost.
Sure, and I understand having to recoup a little bit of that. Also, with looking at costs, was there any reason, I mean, I look at the senior center annual dues of $40. Do we think if we raise it to 45, we would lose people?
Yeah, there is a concern about that, right?
Okay.
I think of all the fees, those ones are the most sensitive.
Okay.
And we had quite a bit of discussion with Sabrina and David on that. We also looked around at other senior centers in the region and what are they charging? Several of them don't have any fee at all. Most are around the $30 range. We're actually kind of on the high end already. And so it's something we can look at, but we're trying to ease into this idea of a cost of doing business fee increase, right? We haven't done that for a very long time. So you see quite a bit of adjustment here. I'd like to do consecutive increases at a much smaller percentage that makes sense. Once we have a good idea of, well, what are we trying to get as far as cost recovery, right? Increasing the fee just to increase the fee without really understanding the dollar amount or what's the benefit to the participant of that is very hard to communicate that to what would probably be our most critical participants.
Fair. And then real quick, going back to the leagues and stuff, have we engaged the leagues? Like, have we talked to the North Whitby Soccer Club or anything like that?
We've met with all the leagues and let them know that we are working on adjusting the fees. Once we go through this process, kind of understand better, are you okay with the direction we're going? We'll have another meeting, and we have set up for doing biannual meetings with all of them. So there won't be any surprises before this comes. We'll make sure that that they have time to put this within the registration, see what the impact is, if there is much of an impact to them, and if they feel like they need to adjust their fees to compensate for it.
Sure. Because obviously, the concern is always you raise it too much and then they have to pass those costs on and kids can't play sports and we don't want that. And those conversations, are they of a nature of, hey, we can't keep subsidizing, we need some cost recovery, or are they also, hey, by charging a little bit more, we'll be able to provide better maintenance, or we'll be able to provide more services? I mean, what's been the tone of those conversations?
Anything that we add really is just reducing the subsidy that the city is giving to the leagues for support of those facilities. They understand the changeover from per participant to per hour. Of course, anytime you have a fee conversation, they want to make sure there's not really an increase in fees, or they express their concern over any impact that might be to participation. So we're trying to be sensitive of how we do it. Mostly we're just trying to change that methodology from the per participant, which has no no factor on the amount of impact or the amount of maintenance we do to an hourly rate, which then at least relates to the amount of impact of that field.
But you did mention, like, in the case of participant, by switching this methodology, you did mention it's about a 30-some-odd% increase.
That's across through
Sure.
facilities and then also, sports leagues as well. But for many of them, what that increase is going to be, we don't quite know yet. It really depends on their hours and total. Right now, we get maybe a couple $1,000s in fees. And we know just from running the models that, like I said, we found it to be a decrease. And so we had to adjust that up. So it's not going to be much of an increase at all.
Okay, yeah, I want to see it explained a little bit better. And has it been a while since there's been an increase of any sizable amount when it comes to things like leagues?
Last year, we raised it 50 cents per participant.
Oh, okay.
And we hadn't increased it for, I don't think it ever's been increased.
Okay, I'm just making sure, so there's a little bit of catch-up there, as opposed to doing, a little increase each year. It's kind of okay, we need to catch up a little. Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an initial, hesitation about the Windjammer Park East Kitchen jumping from 50 to 150. I definitely think that we should be charging more, but I'm wondering if it would make sense to kind of step that up instead of just tripling the price from one year to the next. I don't know if that would interfere, with the cost recovery model if we raise it by $25 a year until we get to the 150, if that would defeat the purpose. I think because the city has charged little to nothing for so long, there's going to be some real sticker shock out there from the organizations that deserve this stuff year after year. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, like I said before, we're still not going to quite get there as far as cost recovery. We don't necessarily have a target point we're trying to reach with this. We looked at what our costs are, looked at how much use there is, and then we looked at the market and looked at comparable rates with other similar facilities in our municipalities and try to match within about the middle ground of that. So.
I just received a spreadsheet from the treasurer of North Woodby Soccer, and they've got 900 kids, and I think they're currently paying $8.50 or $9 a kid. So they pay currently about $8,000 a year for use, and under the new schedule, per hour, per field, it's closer to $40,000. So I think she did the math, and it was about a 500% increase. So unless someone is doing their math wrong, if they had to go from $8,000 a year to $38,000 a year, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So then we run into the problem, that was previously brought up of, well, then people aren't going to be using the fields at all.
Yeah.
So if we reach a point where we should charge something, that if we're going to charge an organization out of business, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and we'll work with the leagues. Obviously, I don't know, I'd have to look at the spreadsheet and check those numbers. That
I'll
doesn't
forward
sound
it to
right
you.
to me, but, yeah, we'll work with the leagues on that. If you want to send that on to me, I'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah, I'll forward it to you. And it was just preliminary. She threw it together on short notice, but, so please double check. How do we decide in terms of hourly rental? The soccer kids tear up the fields pretty good, and so the organization tries to help us maintain the fields. He goes out there mowing the grass and filling the holes and lining the fields. In the time that it takes her to do that, are we charging them to use the field to help us maintain it? I mean, that seems kind of backwards.
Yeah. So most cities have this model of charging at an hourly rate, and so that's the that's the comparable table that we looked at. We're on the low end of what that rate would be at an hourly rate. So, you know, if you were to go and run a similar league in another city, you'd probably be paying more than what you would pay here at this rate.
Yeah, and there is, you know, the problem that we run into is that people are accustomed to the way things
Sure.
currently are. So that any increase is going to be met with a little bit of pushback. So I want to make sure that we've had a chance to talk to, especially all the kids' sport leagues, you know, have them give us the schedule, crunch the numbers, and just double check with everybody that, I mean, even if it's uncomfortable, it's at a minimum doable or sustainable. If we're going to charge somebody out of business, then we need to reevaluate. So I realize that's going to be a lot of legwork, but it would be nice to kind of have every organization understand exactly how much we're talking per year and if that's doable.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
I agree we need to be charging something.
Yeah, we don't want to put any fees in place that are going to be exorbitant or, you know, be a barrier to participation or completely cost prohibitive for the leagues. Mostly we want to change the way that we're assessing the fees to a use factor, right?
Sure.
So we'll definitely be working with the leagues on these, so. We can,
Yeah,
we can, we
I
can
know
run
that's not
some of
your
those
intent.
numbers and calculate out, okay, based off of, you know, the last year's use, here's what they would have paid this last year if they were paying at this fee methodology rate, right? And we can read that back to you.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd just like to remind the council that in the budget that was approved last night, there were, you know, additional revenues put in there for Parks and Recreation, and also the revenues that had been budgeted previously that'll continue to be carried forward throughout 25 and 26. And the items that are in this fee schedule more or less correspond to those revenues that were included in the budget that was approved yesterday. So just try to keep that in mind during the discussions as well. You want to talk about special events?
So the budget assumed adoption of this fee schedule?
Yeah, the budget assumed the adoption of this fee schedule and also the adoption of those decision packages, which included additional revenues to cover those additional costs as well. And part of that was donations, part of that with adult league fees, youth league fees, and there was like a No Child Left Outside grant. Or inside, whatever. But anyway, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's based off class fees, not necessarily these league fees.
Councilmember Arms.
Well, I understand we're trying to encourage people down to the marina, but we're not getting any people down to the marina. And I think that as much as I don't like to do fees, the problem is we're going to have to come to the reality for the city that we can't offer everything for nothing. You know, that even during the hydros, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of everything. And how many people are going down there unless we have more events? We didn't charge for that event, Brian, for the 50th, did we? You know, and how much did that cost us? We don't know. I mean, but what I'm saying, not that you would charge, but if we're going to have more events and stuff like that, that's fine. But, you know, it's all revenue that's coming from something. And as much as the hydro does a wonderful job, Jim, I'm not disputing that. But, you know, sometimes people get used to something for nothing, and we live in a day where everything is costing. And so I think we need to also realize that we're going to have to make that difficult decision, and maybe not by much, but a little incrementally as time goes by so people get used to it. We can't continue to support everything that we love with the budget we have, unless we make some serious cuts in our own budget for the city. So just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Wigginstein.
I have a couple of things, maybe three, I don't know. One's an easy question. Just for clarification, the hourly rate on the fields and really any of those hourly rates on the fields, that's per hour for no matter how many participants, correct?
Correct.
So we're not, look, there, any math done on that, people would reject that that's per participant per hour, needs to be very clear so that they don't assume that that's what we're doing, which would potentially explain for 38,000 versus, right? You start doing the numbers, that's my guess, that's what's what happened. The other thing too is I'm with everybody on that 50 to 150, that's the big kitchen, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, next to the playground.
Do we charge at all like a security deposit with use as well? So that if we have to go back in and clean and do and spend hours getting it ready for the next person, that they potentially lose their deposit? Instead of like the huge cost, which means, I think we benefit. I don't know. It's just, has it been something we can throw out there as a consideration, a way of, ensuring that they take care of the facility as well? I know I'm more cognizant.
Don't we require insurance or no for?
No, not.
No, we don't.
Not for the kitchens, no, but we.
I'm just going to tell you logistically, taking deposits and then refunding those is going to be a pain.
Yeah. It's about-
And I understand that. It's just another line of thinking in order to put that out there. And isn't Fort Nugent Park also partly school district?
Yeah,
They own
the
a
soccer,
good
the
portion
soccer
of it.
fields and the lower fields, those are all the school district, and we have the football field and a couple of soccer fields on the upper fields.
And so when they run an event up there, they're using the football field and the upper fields, or they use,
When there's a soccer tournament or something like that? Well,
track and field,
oh,
if they're doing
Yeah,
any
they-
kind of
they'll use
event
both.
out
They use,
there.
they use the
They use
lower,
both.
yeah, they use both lower fields.
But
and-
we maintain both,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I just was wanting clarification.
Yeah. The lower soccer fields, that is school district property,
Correct. But we maintain
but we maintain.
for free.
Yes.
Charge them.
All right, thank you. Is that it on this topic?
Yep, I'm done.
We're all done, all the categories done? All right. CAC, are you ready to come back up?
I'm ready.
All right.
Nikhil, thank you, you did a great job.
Yes, thank you.
So we're going to move back to 2025 Comprehensive Plan, Major Update, Future Land Use Map, and Survey Results. And back is our Principal Planner, Kat Kamek.
Can you guys hear me? Yes, thumbs up.
That's much better.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm so sorry about that.
You did sound pretty cool.
Oh gosh, now I just lost the room audio.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now, Kak. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry, I didn't have the mic on. My bad.
Okay.
So I will add comments and things at the end of the presentation. So while we have technology working, let's jump straight into the presentation. Take it away, Aaron. On the you can do a share screen for the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the patience with my technical difficulties. Let's see. Let me just make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Are you guys seeing the presentation?
Yep. Yes.
Yes, okay.
I can see it online.
Great. Thank you, Council. My name is Erin O'Kelly. I'm a long-range planner. I work for Kimley Horn. We're the consultants working on the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update. So I will be presenting as a part of the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update the some preliminary community engagement results up until this point that we've collected. I will be just giving a really brief overview of the community engagement kind of strategy where it's at. And then the first community-wide survey that we had open between August to the end of September, it closed on September 30th. During the month of September, we also hosted our first OAKPAC meeting. Has the council been briefed on the OAKPAC meeting up until this point, CAC, or is this the first time they're being introduced?
I think the council is aware of the OAKPAC, but anything related to the meeting, I think they'll be hearing about it now, yes.
Okay, great. So just to remind everyone, we created a community engagement plan for this project for the comprehensive plan periodic update. And some of the key features of that plan, if anyone would like to look at that plan, it is posted on the website on the project page. And some of the key features of the community engagement were utilizing surveys, stakeholder interviews, using the OAKPAC meeting as a form of community engagement to reach out to our specific partners that may be helpful in implementing some policy changes that we're going to have to look at during this periodic update. And of course, we also rely heavily on the project website to post all of our information, trying to be as transparent as possible. So those are really the key features. And then, of course, as the plan moves on to Planning Commission and City Council, we have continuous opportunities over there for some engagement as well. But we are still in the phase where we're trying to utilize all of these strategies, trying to get community engagement. And we're still quite early in the process of the comprehensive plan. So we actually have not completed the second OAKPAC meeting yet. And then the stakeholder interviews have also been pushed off a little bit. So we have completed the first survey and the first OAKPAC meeting. The milestones, the project milestones, are still pretty much on track. We're still reviewing data and possible scenarios, but we're moving very quickly on to goal and policy revisions in the coming weeks. So the first community-wide survey, we had a couple goals in mind utilizing this survey. We really wanted to gather existing information from residents, gauge attitudes about Oak Harbor's potential future growth, and collect valuable information for the new climate element and resiliency sub-element. So I do want to keep that in mind for everyone, that we do have a whole new element and sub-element that we're introducing during this periodic update. So we do have to allocate some time and resources to make sure that we're meeting those state requirements. There is some heavy engagement, and there's some recommended steps that we need to follow for the engagement as well. So a portion of this first survey did, some of those questions went to the new element to collect preliminary data for that. But we were really trying to get, a community-wide, really broad ideas, trying to see where people's priorities were at, and kind of ideas for growth already. So we were pretty strategic in some of the questions that made it into the survey, because we chose to do a smaller survey and be a little more strategic towards growth and climate in this preliminary survey, because those are kind of the first scoping documents that we need to get done relating to the land capacity analysis, housing needs assessment, and the climate scoping work. As far as the results for the survey, we got 308 surveys that were collected over the course of about 6 weeks. 234 of those respondents do live in the city of Oak Harbor. I will say that the results presented in this presentation today are all compiled together. We haven't really done any separation or subsets, like pulling out just the resident responses at this point. We just are doing the preliminary, all of the responses we've collected. Some key points about the demographics that responded to the survey. The highest age group that responded was between 45 to 54. Second highest was 35 to 44. The income that was reported to be the highest responses was 100,000 or higher. We had some female response, a little bit more than male response. And then there was a large majority, not majority, but a large portion of respondents lived in Swantown and Fort Nugent. And just quickly kind of comparing that to general Oak Harbor demographics, median age is 31, median household income 68, 39. Highest populated neighborhood is Broadview. So I would say the responses for this survey skewed a little bit up to, higher age and higher income brackets and living more in single family neighborhoods, a little further out from the city center. So the first couple of questions we asked, we tried as much as possible to do closed-ended questions, but we did do 2 open-ended questions. I'll kind of briefly explain those a little bit later. But the first one we did was, what are the most important areas for the city to focus on? The top 3 areas that were ranked by respondents were public safety, emergency response, sidewalks, roads, utilities, and other infrastructure improvements, and businesses and jobs. And so I know this is a really broad collection of responses. We typically like to ask this question very early on, and then that helps us as we're looking at the policies around public safety and emergency response. We might go reach out to our partners a little more. We do a little extra effort trying to understand what that means or what priorities people mean about that. So we do a little extra effort a little bit later. Same with the businesses and jobs, just trying to, people rank these as really high priority. So we do need to do some continuing work trying to figure out what would that mean for the policies. Then the second question for the community-wide survey, what types of amenities would you like to see more of? The top response was the neighborhood commercial businesses and services. Then we had the community facilities, the outdoor recreation amenities, waterfront amenities, and then the last 2 were the general commercial businesses, and then the civic institutional uses like schools and hospitals. And then these were the open-ended questions. I'm not a very big fan of word clouds, but sometimes it is a little easy to just kind of quickly get some keywords that were used most frequently in the open-ended responses. But we are continuously kind of reviewing those open-ended responses and kind of trying to pull out what work or what steps we need to take from these open-ended responses. But there are a wide range of topics that people presented to us. So there's not a lot of analytics we've done on these open-ended questions at this moment to present to you. But there were a lot of people that talked about housing and recreation and opportunities for residents, just for, around community building and quality of life. Those were kind of the big things as far as opportunities. So people were really excited to talk about, what they could do in their city as a resident to kind of make it better. And that's why the waterfront word is kind of a big right here. And then you can see still destination town tourism. So a lot of ideas about that when we asked about opportunities from the residents. And then challenges. Here again, we see housing, and then a little bit different approach. We see a lot of people brought up concerns about traffic infrastructure. There were obviously concerns about growth and housing and affordability for that. But we're still kind of analyzing these open-ended questions and pulling out some further action items that we're going to continue to do and analyze through engagement. So we decided to ask a question, hopefully trying to identify people's perceptions about the neighborhoods, like the future potential of the neighborhoods in Oak Harbor. I personally really enjoyed this question. I think we got some really interesting answers and responses, and I think it sets the stage for some interesting exploration about what these future of these neighborhoods could look like. So we asked, where do you see the most opportunity? And for this question, we presented a couple different options. We said the most opportunity for mixed use, the most opportunity for middle housing, the most opportunity for just commercial. So we presented a couple different options, and then people were able to provide, the most applicable neighborhood that they thought that specific use would go. So respondents said Old Town had the most opportunity for mixed use, and we did describe in the survey as mixed use being both residential and commercial and neighborhood shopping retail. Then respondents also said that Fort Nugent had the most opportunity for 2 to 5 residential and multi-story residential. Again, going back to the demographics, we did have a large number of respondents say that they lived in Fort Nugent, so I thought that was an interesting fact to hear. And then respondents also said that Alt Forest had the most opportunity for commercial industrial, and then said that Swantown had the most opportunity for accessory dwelling units and mother-in-law. And then going back to the demographics, Swantown was one of the highest responses in the demographics as well. So thought that was interesting. And then we did ask an open-ended question associated with this, where we said, where do you see the most opportunity? There was an open-ended question following this, asking people to explain anything, if they wanted to add any details to this particular question. We got a lot of open-ended, discussion around specific kind of housing, specific kind of commercial, or what they were thinking of what they had when they maybe said mixed use for a specific area. So again, those are hard to analytically review, but they are interesting to look at, and the planning staff are still kind of reviewing those responses. And then the survey shifted to the climate-related data that we need to collect just to help in creating the new climate element. So it's very common that we ask for this climate work, what climate-related hazards are you most concerned about? So the highest response was wildfire, drought, and then the other, please specify. So I listed the others' responses over on the right-hand side. I do want to note that, there were 16 responses that said that they weren't concerned about climate-related hazards. So that's just important to note moving forward. And then it goes to sea level rise, extreme heat, flooding, and then extreme precipitation. And then I've listed some other concerns that people posted, and then the number in parentheses is the number of respondents that mention that particular hazard. And then what assets in the community should be prioritized. So this particularly, in the next time we come back to the council with some preliminary climate data that we've done analysis on, you'll see why this question is very important for us to ask the community. Because in the climate work, we are supposed to do an assessment of all of Oak Harbor's existing assets. And we're supposed to identify which assets are most vulnerable to which potential hazards. So then there is a checkpoint that we are supposed to go back to the community and check that they also view certain assets and make sure those priorities align. So doing this preliminary question of which assets should be prioritized, and then they say infrastructure and roads, well, then we would go back and through our analysis, we would gather and see all the infrastructure and roads, see what the data says as far as their vulnerability. And then we would adjust accordingly into the policies, how we would prioritize that. And then this is another part of the climate work that we are required to do by the state. So what habitual changes would you make in response to possible impacts from climate-related changes? So each of these options that were presented are potential. There's a wide number of different policies that could be implemented by Oak Harbor based on these different responses. So, for instance, walk or bike to work, if that was a really, really high response, we would ensure that different policies were pushed forward through the development process, the policy development process in the next phase of the project. So the highest responses for this question were renovate home for energy efficiency, supporting local economy, and recycling. And so that's really important for us to consider before we start the policy development, because there's a lot of different policies we could review to help make sure that the policies go to how can people renovate their homes for energy efficiency, supporting local economy and recycling. So it's good information for us as policy analysts moving forward into the next phase of the project. Okay. So moving on to the first OAKPAC meeting. So it sounds like you guys already got some introduction to the OAKPAC meeting. The OAKPAC was a specific group that we invited that has a lot of different stakeholders and partners that Oak Harbor works with to accomplish comprehensive plan actions and policies. We wanted to convene this group so that we could get early input about issues and potential policies, and then we could also work together and kind of brainstorm potential solutions in a better environment. So the first OAKPAC meeting, we had a lot of housing related stakeholders. We had Habitat for Humanity. We did have some Island County staff, and those Island County staff were specifically housing specialists. The Naval Air Station, WashShot, had a couple representatives from the Builders Association, and then we had Oak Harbor City staff attending. So in total, there were 10 stakeholders, and that's not including the consultant team or Oak Harbor staff. So the topic for discussion at this first OAKPAC meeting was really about housing. We wanted to start with the housing discussion very early on. You guys have already been in discussion, regarding the land capacity analysis, the housing and growth allocations, and trying to understand what solutions, the city of Oak Harbor needs to start reviewing and possibly putting into this periodic update. So we decided to start with that. So we did do some broad visioning questions of what does Oak Harbor look like in 20 years to these different stakeholders, what should change and what should stay the same. But then we specifically asked about challenges and opportunities around housing. So we provided some examples, affordability, and then opportunities of like transit options, possible funding, diverse housing. Those are examples. But we had a whole conversation at the meeting about this, and then we kind of expanded the conversation a little bit to not just housing, but what other impacts from housing and growth should we be considering from these and hearing from these partners. So as far as challenges and opportunities go, we heard, quite a bit of challenges about cost to develop and supply at an affordable price, multimodal transportation and that relationship to affordability for housing, lack of public space, green spaces for higher density housing areas, balancing growth and actual development trends and market conditions, cost of construction, and then navigating the shift from for the growing population, trying to adjust to city growth, but also trying to listen to the existing residents and make sure that they're being heard. And then some potential opportunities identified at this meeting where we did identify quite a few different partnerships that, as far as like educational partners and economic and job partners and transportation partners that we will be continuing to work with and discuss possible policy development and solutions. So that was a really great conversation. And then there was definitely some conversation about the potential opportunities of the waterfront that can be provided. Specifically, open space, green space, how can that be improved, multimodal. And then at the end of our report, we just summarized, these are basically all of the takeaways that we'll be considering before we move into the policy development phase. So we'll be exploring, what public and private partnerships around housing need to be identified that we need to start and then could possibly be used to secure affordable housing opportunities or funding. Establishing balance between housing market options with existing housing patterns. We did spend some time discussing potential incentives. There's a lot of different ways you can go about incentives. It's incentives for developers or incentives for, property owners or anything like that. So we will be exploring possible incentives moving forward. What's feasible for Oak Harbor will be analyzed a little bit further. We had a good discussion about rentals, managing rentals, and how to maintain the long-term rental housing stock. So we'll be exploring some options for that in policy. One thing we did have a really great conversation about at this OPAC meeting was, the relationship between a resident, your job and your housing and your transportation, and really trying to find that really good balance for people. There are a lot of people that, live outside of Oak Harbor and come and work in Oak Harbor. There are people that work in Oak Harbor, live outside. Is there any way we can analyze this further and try and come up with solutions that help alleviate some of those pressures? Because if you spend more on transportation to get to your job, you're less likely to be able to afford your housing, and you're less likely to be able to live in a place that you would like to live or stay in Oak Harbor. And then another really great conversation we had was around how do we keep, all of our younger populations here once they graduate high school, trying to find how can we put solutions in this comp plan to establish living wage jobs for them. So we definitely discussed, building a skilled workforce, talking about building partnerships with school districts and looking at that, which I think was great. We did have another also discussion about how can we alleviate other, pressures or stressors for people to live and work where they want. And one of those barriers that was identified was childcare. So just making sure that that's also considered moving forward to try and help with the housing situation. Okay, CAC. Sorry, talked a lot.
Right. Thank you, Erin. Just to provide kind of staff commentary and takeaways, we echo all the findings of the consultants. We'll continue to look at the data. There's a lot of open-ended comments in there, and we provided that in the packet so that the council can read them. Everybody that I have asked to read and provide some feedback have all given me various feedbacks, because there's no real kind of common things. It's yeah, the comments are going or either way. So as you read, as I tried to read them, it was hard to say, oh, we have X number of percentage doing this and that. So we'll continue to take a look at those comments and see how they help shape the policy as we move forward. But if you look at the OPAC discussions and the concerns and the opportunities that they have listed, and when I see them, I see some of those same comments in the public comments and the open-ended questions as well. Some, and the Planning Commission also echoed the same things. Affordability. How do we keep affordability as we move in time? How do we kind of continue to keep that affordability? Was something that came up, and I think the safety concerns in the Commons may have come from the homelessness or any other visible things that the community is seeing, and then of course all of the housing, and there's ideas about tourism. Neighborhood commercial is one of the takeaways. It was nice to see that people want to see more neighborhood commercial. We can support that in our policy and land uses. So those are some of the general things that we've seen, kind of just generally gathered from our glance at it. And as Erin mentioned, we'll continue to keep looking at that data and see what we can draw from it. Quickly. Switching topics, not switching topics, but just giving you an update of what's going on with the rest of the comp plan. We are still working on moving documents related to the climate change policies. We'll come back to council probably at the beginning of next year to talk about that. We're continuing to work with the county in dealing with all our UGA and growth-related questions and analysis. And we have our smaller group that with the representatives from the council in that group. We're working with them, And that group has had 2 or 3 meetings, and we have a couple more meetings scheduled in December. The discussions going back and forth, we don't have anything that rises up to city council discussion, any options at this time. We're going back and forth. We've had a few letters go back and forth. They're still trying to kind of look at our capacity analysis and try to make sure that we have taken, all the angles to try and find capacity. And we have responded, still looking for information on the UGA and the capacity there, and to kind of come to a common determination to move forward, right? So our idea and our thoughts are still trying to find a solution to move forward, to find a solution for the UGA. We have some ideas that we'll continue to work with the county on. In working with the future land, so the reason why the future land use map is a topic around which we'll probably have a few discussions with the UGA is because that's the tool that the city and the county kind of uses to communicate with each other on what we want to do with the UGA. And so we will continue to work with them in terms of what changes can we do, and we'll bring back a map that we can talk about. In our analysis of all this future land use map and so on, we also found that we probably should, with the density changes and the options that we're considering for the city, we will have to update our environmental impact statement for the comprehensive plan. So our comprehensive plan was originally adopted in 1999. They did an environmental impact statement, and our densities that we are projecting to have with our comprehensive plan amendment and for the population that we're planning will exceed that environmental impact statement's capacity. And so we will likely have to take that on. And trying to take that on actually opens up options for our comprehensive plan in terms of trying to look at changes, which is very critical. This is the time I think we're looking at a lot of change in terms of all the housing, right? And so this is the time, maybe it's a good time to look at it and kind of assess the impacts of all the changes that we're considering. So this has come to light, and so this could be a way for us to consider change as we move forward. So there are still a lot of options available and a lot of solutions moving forward. We're trying to work with the county, and we hope that we will continue to work with the smaller group that the council has for this, and then we'll come back in January with more options and more information for you to consider. So, with that, we'll open up questions. Anything on the survey or anything else related to the comprehensive plan, we'll be happy to address that.
So quickly before I turn it over to council, I was just going to let Councilmember Stuckey, Councilmember Arms, and Councilmember Wittgenstein know. I have the letter that we issued from the city back to the county laying out the things that CAC just mentioned. That was already shared with the members of the council who have been on the committee. That'd be Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Marshall, and Councilmember Wiesner. So, but I'm happy to also provide you guys a copy of that letter, just so you have it. But with that, I'll turn it over to you to ask questions, comments. Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thanks, CAC, and thanks, Aaron. Couple of just interesting comments out of this. It's always nice to see when you, I think when we all have something rolling in the back of our head as a thought, that it gets confirmed, when we go out and reach out to the citizens, because we're up here trying to do this for the people of Oak Harbor, not for ourselves. If we were doing it for ourselves, we'd probably do it in a whole different fashion. But, one of the things that we were talking about is, we have a very clear marching order involving affordable housing, and affordable housing has been a buzzword for several years, and we saw it again in that cloud deal. And I prefer a priority list, but I get the cloud thing, I guess. So, but part of the concerns that I had as we go through this housing discussion was the commercial side of things, because that can get lost in this. Our focus is we have a task from the state, right, and it's all about providing X amount of housing at AMIs, and we have this charts that we have to fill out, and we are tasked. We have these numbers down solid. The numbers we don't have down solid are the jobs that are going to need to be created to serve those households. Our current buildable lands analysis came up, I think, with 1,124 jobs that would be created for 5,500 new households. And you know, that math just doesn't work, right? So I'm happy to see that the people of Oak Harbor who took the survey, the 308 people who took the survey, recognize, as you notice, business and jobs was ahead of providing more housing options. Because what are housing options if you don't have any place to work? What's a community if you have to wait in line for 2 hours at a grocery store because we don't have enough of them? So I'm happy to see that the citizens recognize that, and that's something I'm going to continue to kind of be that voice as we go through these numbers. And you guys can get tired of listening to it, but at the same time, I realize the focus is on housing, but we can't forget about that, as well as our parks and our outdoor recreation, which was another thing we brought up in the buildable lands analysis, right? We can cram all these people into a small space, but what kind of living is that if we don't have outdoor space, jobs, et cetera? The other thing that was exciting to see was the concept that the community actually could adopt neighborhood commercial. Number one, right? It was a discussion that we've been having. We've been calling them commercial pods, I think is the word we've been using. It's something we really haven't done in our city, right? But when you think about it, you know, how convenient it is to be able to walk to that convenience store, or walk to the grocery store, cuts down on carbon footprint, cuts down on the use of our roadways and the maintenance required for our roadways. It's not something we've done, though, traditionally. We haven't traditionally allowed for commercial in the middle of a residential development. And again, I'm going to go back to that's because we have these codes that says, here's what you can do in this area versus here's what a building should look like when it's built in this area. We don't care what purpose it serves as long as it looks like it fits. And so, you know, this again is that gentle step to form-based code, a change of the way we've done business in our community. We've built these great little housing developments, but we continue to build them further and further away from our commercial corridor, right? Which just makes more trips, more roads, you know, more carbon footprint. So I'm glad to see that, I think subliminally, right, the people of Oak Harbor see that we could be doing things different that would actually create a better lifestyle. So that's something, you know, we're just I think we're going to have to continue, and I think the survey says it. And to Aaron, you know, on the survey, you know, great job. 308 people doesn't seem like a lot, but I got to tell you, after, you know, doing surveys, you know, where we've mailed out a survey to every utility holder and we get 70 of them back, 308 is a great number. But here's one of my experiences with surveys. We get the opinions of the people who are actively involved, and then the people who are sitting back on their couches, they're going to be those backyard Monday morning quarterbacks, right? And they're going to come along and they're going to say, oh, well, that's not right. So here's what I'd like to see us do. We've got now some less open-ended questions, right? Open-ended questions are harder for some people. They're harder to answer. They require more forethought. We've now got some brackets that we can put some of these things in, where we can say, most important things in Oak Harbor should be public safety, sidewalks, business, and jobs. Would you or would you not agree? Right? I think, in other words, I think the results of this survey going out to the people and having some way to give them feedback back to us on the results that we're presenting is an important part of this, because I feel as though we could get feedback from more than 308 people on the results of a survey given by 308 people. I hear it every time after we do a survey. Oh, well, that couldn't have been right. I would have said this. Well, why didn't you? Right? And unfortunately, what happens is these surveys, they have a shelf life, right? Survey's done, you no longer have input. But then once they see the input that's out there, if they don't agree with it, they're typically going to be more vocal than they were when giving the survey. So I'd like to see some way that we can engage the community with the results of this survey and give the community the ability to give feedback on how they feel about the results of this survey. And we're either going to get a lot of positive comments, yeah, you're spot on, I agree with what those 308 people said, or we're going to get the opposite. But as we all know, if it is the opposite, we're typically going to hear that fairly strong and loud, because that's typically how it works. So that's my 2 cents on the survey. I think we can take it one step further through that public engagement process, use the results of this survey to fine tune, take some of these open-end questions, change them into a closed-end question, do you agree or don't you agree? And I think we can get a lot more feedback from the public. But, what we're seeing here, I guess, is a confirmation of some of the discussions we've been having for the last 6 or 8 months that we were quite frankly unsure of. I certainly was unsure how the public would take the idea of commercial pods, and I was certainly unsure about how the public felt about businesses being as important as that housing element. But this certainly kind of shows that or at least our thoughts have been heading in the right direction. So if nothing else, it certainly confirms some things I think we're all thinking. So, but thanks for the presentation. Great job. And we're not done yet, CAC. Got another 6-8 months of this to go, but we'll get through it. Thanks for all your efforts.
Councilmember Stuckey.
You are on fire with those comments about the survey. I'm sitting here, I'm like, well said. Because I agree. Yeah, no, making it, I know there were some people, my mom, who thought the survey was a little confusing with all those opening questions and stuff. As long as we I'm not going to say redo the survey, bad terminology. We take the parameters, as you said, and put it out, as long as we make it seem like a way that doesn't look like, oh, maybe we didn't like it, let's look for something else. No, we confirmation on that and making it very simple, yes, no, for those who just want to take a quick click. Because while I do agree and disagree with the 300 and some odd, it's good, it's not great, but I think it wasn't great because of all those open questions. How long, it took a lot of time and a lot of thought if you really want to fill out the survey. So I like it. Let's do it. Let's just be careful on the phrasing, but make it easy, make it simple. Let's get more responses to confirm, and those quarterbacks might weigh in. Thanks, Jim.
Councilmember Wigginstein, Councilmember Arms, Mayor Pro Tem. All right. Hearing nothing, thank you very much, CAC, for your presentation. Thank you. We are going to move on to. Thank you. We are going to move on to Parks and Recreation, future of the Oak Harbor Marina. Here to talk to us today is Brian Smith and Harbor Master Chris Sublett.
No, I'll let you know. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us again. Again, we're here to talk about the future of the Oak Harbor Marina. And Jim, I absolutely loved the phrase you used, survey says. I haven't heard that in a million years. So that was pretty cool. So anyway, jumping into our presentation today. Am I controlling this, or are you? Yeah. Okay. So just a quick summary. We've been before you several times now and held the open houses, so you've heard a lot of this and seen a lot of this, but I think it's important to keep it in the forefront as we work through this. So just a quick recap or summary of what we know so far. There's a lot of challenges at the marina, and we expect a lot more. In fact, I'll be sharing with you later in this presentation and show you some pictures of just those challenges that happened within the last 24 hours. We're a regional marina that serves the greater population of Oak Harbor. We can no longer afford all of these capital improvement projects. We've been able to do it for a number of years, and we've been super successful financially, but we're at the point now where the costs far exceed what we can generate at the marina. As we look at what we're going to do at the marina, there's really 3 choices. And the third one is, as Council said last time, isn't a choice, but it's important that we keep it as well listed. Remove and replace the marina, renovate the marina, and close the marina. And then there's 4 options on how we would fund those options. Formation of a port district, grants and legislation support, special taxes and bonds, and then something other that is yet to be determined or yet to be identified. The thing we have to remember that really came to the forefront in the last presentation, I believe it was October 23rd, is that if we form a port district, the city of Oak Harbor loses control of the marina. So that kind of puts a damper on grants and legislative support, and then special taxes and bonds. Any of those things that we would do that we would do now wouldn't necessarily carry over to the port district. So we have to keep that in mind. One of the key takeaways from the open house and in the comments and conversations that we've had with the city council is no one wants to close the marina. Not the public, not you guys, not the staff, definitely not the staff. So we have to find another solution. And it's not going to be easy, but I believe we'll get there, definitely. As we move forward, we'll be back in December to seek authorization and to move forward with one of the 3 paths and then one of the 4 options for financing. So just to dive deeper into the financial pieces of the options, to remove and replace the marina, the estimated total, including the channel, which is $50 million, is about $94 million. To renovate the marina, including the channel, which is still $50 million, is $75 million. And then to close the marina, we don't have a real solid, firm number on that, but we've been told somewhere around 10 to 12 million. And the challenge with that is if that is selected, how is the city going to repay that? We know that the debt service is going to be in excess of $800,000 per year. So that's a big chunk. The financial strategy options, again, formation of the port district, grants, legislative support, special taxes and bonds, and we've talked a lot about B&O tax. And then the unidentified one. None of these are really going to be the silver bullet that we're going to do it today and tomorrow we're going to be able to move forward with all the projects. These are going to take time to accomplish, and then it's going to take time to be able to bond or generate revenue off of them. And again, if we do a port district, that almost eliminates the bottom 3. So we'll have to keep that in mind. Some of our challenges with the marina is silting in, the breakwater is failing, and I'm going to show you a couple examples of that later in this presentation, as well as our docks and our systems are failing, and the channel is silting in. We look for a lot of this to happen in 29 to 30 in that range, with just a ramp up in 27 and 28. So, November 4th. It's a beautiful picture. It's just not a beautiful picture of the Oak Harbor Marina. November 4th, 2024, during the windstorm, patio F11 was damaged. You can see that the panel literally fell off in the water. We know where it's at. We had a diver go down and put a line on it, so we have it. It's just too big for us to pick up. Just last night, we had more windstorm damage. Patios F18, F14, F15 walls all came loose. And then the south end of E-Dock separated and shifted a little bit. Tim, can you bring up F-Dock Patio 1? Well, that's E-Dock, but we can start there. Yeah, that one's fine. So E-Dock, if you look at it, E-Dock is the dock just before F-Dock, and you can see how it doesn't line up anymore. You see where that green hose is? Up until last evening, that green hose was resting against the rub board. That's the wooden, I don't know, does this have a pointer? There it is. So that green hose right there should rest on the outside of that. But you can see how everything shifted. Something's broke under this plate, and we've had problems with that before. And we did a lot of work, and we had it fixed, but obviously it didn't hold. So as we speak right now, our amazing staff is looking at that, trying to fix that, trying to figure out what's going on. That's a pretty good shift. That's about 8 or 10 inches, and it's separated from this dock here, which creates a trip hazard on that plate there. So it's not only bad for the marina, but it's bad for our guests and tenants who are out here. If we can show the video one, F1, that would be good.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened is in the windstorm last night, and the winds were out of the east side. You see that gap right there? That's bad. So what happens is, it's like you have a piece of metal and you bend it and you bend it and you bend it till it breaks. That's what's starting to happen here. This panel here is just being held on with brackets, rods, and big bolts. So something is given away to create that gap there and that movement. If the video was working correctly, you could see how calm the seas are in that picture, but you would see that panel move 2 to 3, 4 inches back and forth. So we have 3 areas within the marina from last night's windstorm that this is happening. If we can go back to the presentation. The good news is that, there is good news. The good news is that our staff has been thinking long and hard about what we can do to fix this. How can we support these walls? So Duncan came up with this idea of creating a strong back solution and bolting it to the deck, which would hold those in position. They'd be rigid and rock solid. The challenge with that idea is the breakwater is meant to move a little bit, not 3 or 4 inches, but just a little bit. So what we're doing is we're working with Moffett and Nichols. There's 3 options to this drawing. We've sent the drawings to Moffett and Nichols, and we've asking them their opinion of if this would work or not. Is this a possibility? Would it create more damage? Would it make it too rigid so when the waves hit it, it just snaps? Or what would happen? So we're anxious to hear back from them. One of the neat things about this solution is we would probably be able to install it in-house, and we'd be putting them about every 9 feet, so there'd be a ton of them to put in. But by doing it in-house, we're saving labor costs, definitely. So hats off to the staff for always thinking and trying to come up with a good idea. As part of the last presentation when we were here, October 23rd, there were several questions that came from that. And that's really the gist of the reason why I'm here today, is to go over those questions. How do we quantify the economic numbers of the marina? What parts of the marina does the state, feds, and city own? What are the details with the revision clauses? Do we have permission to dredge the channel? Who makes the decision on the Navy property? What would be the new Port District footprint? And will a B&O tax cover the dredging? And we have answers for a lot of these, but not all of them. So how do we quantify the economic numbers? Well, it just so happens that recently there were a lot of headlines about money going to port districts. The first one was $82 million sent to Port District. The second one was another $44.5 million sent to port districts. So you can see where port districts are receiving a lot of money. Just the Port of Anacortes received $72.5 million. $7.4 million of that was specifically for the marina. Imagine if we were a port district and we received $7.4 million, what we could do. You can see the others there. Port of Tacoma was 11.6. And then all the way down to the Port of Bellingham that was $1.9 million. Even $1.9 million would help us tremendously. And then we dug deeper into financial statements for the Port of Anacortes, and it said in the financial statement, the financial report, that the Port of Anacortes, the marina, generates $10 million in local spending in their downtown area. It also generates another $14 million of business on their commercial dock. So that marina is generating $24 million for Anacortes. Why not us? Why can't we be that person? Another question is, and this is one, these next two that we did not get complete answers on yet, but we're working towards that. What parts of the marina does the state, feds, and city own? Well, we know that DNR owns the tidelands. That's the wet part of the marina where the docks are. And we know that the city of Oak Harbor owns the uplands. However, this is contested by DNR, and that has to do with the deed and the revision clause. That's the next question. As we look through the deed in Section 5, there definitely is a revision clause, and it states that the Navy can take that uplands back, in the case of an emergency or war, or if they want to. We haven't gotten any clarification on what exactly these mean, so we'll bring that back to you at a later date. Do we have permission to dredge the channel? Can the city of Oak Harbor dredge the channel? We had a great meeting this morning with the Army Corps of Engineers. I thought it was great, and she took the time to explain to us that in the Army Corps of Engineers' mind, yes, we could dredge the channel, but there is a question of ownership, and we believe that DNR owns the channel, so we're going to be meeting with them to discuss that. She said that it's likely the same scenario as if you were dredging the marina. You would go through the same dredge permitting process, the same exact things that we're doing right now. The challenge with this is there would be mitigation from the Army Corps of Engineers because it hasn't been dredged in 10 years. If you look at the mitigation of the marina, it's roughly $800,000, $1 million. So if you take the footprint of the marina and put it in the channel where we dredge, because mitigation is based on area, not volume, you can imagine what that mitigation would be. So it would be expensive. So she has replied to us and sent us some more information since this meeting, which is great. She seems like she's really on top of it. And she's very interested in participating in us in finding these answers out, in meeting with DNR with us, and just kind of going down this path with us to see what all would be involved with that. Who makes the decision on the Navy property? After some research, we learned that the General Services Administration, the GSA, plays a big part in that. We would work through the Navy to get to them. And then eventually, we would have a conversation with them and see if they would be willing to donate that property to us. And that's a property on the east side of the marina, on the other side of the fence. One of the exciting things that we found out was, one of the criteria for donation is Parks and Recreation. So the marina falls right into that. So we inherently fall into a good position. We've just got to have this conversation with them and see if they'd be willing to do it. The next question we had was, what would be the new Port District footprint? So we did some research and we learned where the Coupeville Port District ends and where the Anacortes Port District ends. Coupeville's Port District ends around Miller Street and Rolling Hills. It's kind of a jagged line, but that seems to be the biggest line. So, and Anacortes ends on the other side of the bridge. So realistically, our footprint for our Port District could go from the edge of Coupeville, Miller Street, all the way up to the bridge. And anything in between, any size, however it's decided we would want to do that. So will a B&O tax cover the dredging? I know that David answered some of this at the last meeting, but just to refresh that, a B&O tax would cover debt payments on a 20-year note at 4% interest. The debt payment would be about $800,000, and that's about the same as we would generate with the B&O tax. And we'd need to also use the $360,000 worth of dredge fees that'll be retired in December of next year. And how we figure that out, and just this is good, as we look at the costs of these projects, in this example of borrowing $11 million, for each $1 million borrowed at a 4% 20-year payback, we would pay back $73,112 in debt per million. So looking at the example of 11 million, that's how we got to the 800,000. So as we look at these bigger projects, 50 million for the channel, you can use that formula to see just the enormous cost of what that debt service would be. And we get an interest rate that's fairly low because municipal debt is tax exempt. So that's the end of the questions. That's the end of the update that I have for you. I'd love to field some more questions and hear your comments and make sure that we're getting all the information you need so that when we come back in December, it's critical that we get direction in December. So we want to make sure that we're giving you all the information that we have. So, questions, comments?
Councilmember Arms.
I have a question. So let's say we go ahead with the port. We don't know how long it's going to take. So are we going to do a port and still do the dredging? You know, I mean, if we're going to sit here and wait for 5 years or whatever, well, you know, we're done by that time because the dredging is way past. So can we dredge and still do the port, or how are we going to
Correct.
How are we going to put that all together?
That comes down to a financial piece that is a bit of a challenge in my mind, because if the city takes on that bond for that dredging, then are they still liable for it when we become a port district? That's a great question that I don't have an answer for.
Yours, Dave.
Well, and so keep in mind too, though, if you become a port district, if that's the route we go and that happens, then this shifts. It's no longer our responsibility at that point. So,
We've had some preliminary discussions with our financial advisor and also our bond counsel regarding this. So when we take out the debt, we're taking out the debt as the city of Oak Harbor with all of our history and, our credit rating and our financials. If Port District if we were to take out the debt and then transfer everything to the Port District, we couldn't just transfer the loan. We couldn't just say, you're going to take over the loan. We'd actually have to make sure that, knowing this ahead of time before we float the bond, we would have to put together like not your typical type of loan where it's callable after 10 years or so. All a callable means is you can't refund it for 10 years. We would have to put something together where you could refund it within a year or so. And what that basically means is we would have to receive funding from the Port District to defuse the bond, to pay off that bond. We couldn't just transfer that bond. So there's a little bit of a risk there, since if a Port District is created, it would be a separate governing body than the city. So we would have to ensure that whenever we went ahead and transferred any rights or any assets to the new district, we'd also have to have a pretty solid agreement in there that you're going to have to take out your own debt and then purchase what we're transferring over to you with enough funds to diffuse our debt. So it's a little bit of a risk to do it that way. If we were to find out sooner rather than later if the voters wanted to do a port district, that would negate the need for us even to go ahead and get debt in the first place. If the voters voted for a port district and the port went ahead and did everything that's according to the plan.
Well, I get that, but the problem is, even if the citizens said they want the port district, doesn't mean we're going to get the port district. And how long is it going to take us before we find out that answer? I mean, is it going to be, 2 years or
we don't
5?
have we don't have 2 years. So this is going to have to go on the ballot next year at the general
Well,
election.
that's what I'm saying, but I'm just saying, even if they say yes, doesn't mean that we're still going to get to be a port district, does it?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yes.
Yeah, you would basically, you would put it forth on the ballot with petitional commissioners as well, and if it passes, they're in business right away or shortly thereafter.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I have the opinion that we should do all of the above, and because of the timing of the port district has to take a while, I think that we should definitely pursue the D&O tax only for the businesses of $5 million and above, and then obviously go after every grant and find and continue our discussions, and definitely go for the port district. I think we need to try every avenue available to us in case one of those things ends up falling through. That's my 2 cents. And Chris, would you mind emailing me your PowerPoint presentation?
She wants you to email her the PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks. Thanks for getting answers to those.
Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I think I've said this before, that we need to be doing all the above. I think your, analogy of none of these are a silver bullet is spot on. I think one of the things that we do need to discuss and agree on in the next, 60 to 90 days is, we've got a trip coming up to DC. Each year we kind of go a little bit with hat in hand, but, we don't necessarily go purpose-driven. We go to have conversation. One of the conversations obviously is at the Pentagon, and other conversations at Congressman Larson's office, and then we try to get in to see. Okay, somebody broke something.
Are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording, but notice
Then let's
for
keep going.
Councilmember Heisen.
Yep.
Okay.
Someone messenger.
Well, and my comments are around this trip to DC. We traditionally go with, not necessarily a huge agenda. It's a combination, training that we get from National Association, as well as, the meetings that we have. I think we have to go there within mind that this is probably the number one conversation this year that we have to have. Maybe I'm all wet, but again, it's, I think, something we need to discuss over the next 60 to 90 days, how we approach this trip. Do we go out there with the little legislative priority card that's got 5 or 6 items on it, right, like we do each year, or do we go there within mind that this is the subject of the discussion? We are going to have a chance to sit down with military brass. Every year they talk about, morale, and welfare and recreation, because that's quite frankly the city's biggest contribution to the Navy, right? The fact that we are a desirable place to live for their sailors, and so a lot of the conversation goes to that. We certainly have them around the environmental. We've had them around, the stability of the base and future enhancements to the base, but this is a conversation about morale, welfare, and recreation for the military. They used to have a marina of their own. Used to actually be able to rent sailboats from that marina. I can remember people who had no clue how to sail could rent a 27-foot sailboat from the Navy for, I think it was $35 a day, I think, if I remember correctly. Those are not the businesses of the Navy anymore, and they know that. Those are those they rely upon their community partners. So that discussion needs to be taking place as a number one priority with them. Discussion, I think the continued meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers, it set us up for some of these conversations you're having now. I think while we're back there, we connect with those same people who helped us connect with the local people, and we keep those conversations going. I think the conversation with Congressman Larson, Cantwell, and the rest have to be centered around this if we're going to be going that route. I don't think we can go back there with our hat in hand for 10 or 15 different things. And so everybody, I think we should be thinking about that, and we should decide if that's the tact we're going to take. But I agree with Councilmember Heisen. We need to be doing all the above for now.
Councilmember Stuckey.
So you piqued my interest a little bit with Anacortes. Because obviously it's a city we're compared to a lot because we're similar size and geographic location. Do we know why Anacortes got so much compared to the other municipalities who are much larger?
As we were reading through the audit manual, a lot of that had to do with clean vehicles and stuff like that, clean emissions, things like that. Anacortes, not long ago, and I mean, maybe not long ago, maybe 20 years ago or so, was a shell of what it is now, and it's rebuilt itself through these sorts of appropriations and funding sources, and to the marina that they are today, which is an amazing marina. It's beautiful.
And did you get an impression how, I mean, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of money going to not the city, but the Port District,
That's correct.
which is a separate entity, which is what we're proposing. What impression do you get on how well the city and the port get along? I mean, do they work hand in hand? Are they, they work great, or is there tension there?
I'm not really sure on that one. I don't know.
That's fair, and it's a subjective question, so. And then, assuming that, we move forward with the Port District and we put out to a vote, do we have a little bit of a plan on advertising? Like I said, for me personally, the marina has not always been I'm one of the few people who doesn't see this marina itself as just the crown jewel of Oak Harbor, the end-all, be-all. But I can see the benefit of a port district of all they can do, aside from just the marina. So what strategy, if any, and maybe I'm getting ahead of it, here. Do we have to get past the mentality of port district, marina, people with yachts? Why would the taxpayers want to pay for that? I'm not indicating that's what it is, but it's easy to hear port and then think people with fancy yachts, and why would taxpayers want to pay for that? So do we have a strategy to kind of, if we pursue this, get beyond that mentality?
We have had early conversations of bringing a consultant on to manage that whole campaign and lead us down that path. But you hit on something that is really key, and that's people assuming that the Port District is solely for the marina, and that's truly not the case, because when you look at Anacortes and all the money they got for all the various things, the clean emissions, vehicles, sorts of things like that, that benefits the whole city. That doesn't just benefit the marina. So years ago I had talks with the Washington Port Authority, and he explained to me that while you're doing this and it's triggered by the marina, it's not necessarily for the marina. The marina is just a small piece of the port district. Just this Goldie Road would be a small part of it, or any industrial center or anything like that. So it's got to be put out there that this is good for the city, and the marina is just a small little tile in the floor of that. It's not. We're not doing this to benefit the marina, which it would, but we're doing this to benefit the entire city of Oak Harbor.
So what we have to do, and what we've talked about, is whatever consulting firm we end up going with when we make that decision, if that's what we do, we need to have mock-ups and drawings and presentations to actually go out to the public so they can see the vision for what this does. It's more about the marina, it's also about the boardwalk and everything else that we want to do along the waterfront. So how it's bringing our downtown into the marina and the boardwalk and everything else. So I think if we could show the community that and see that this is what you're going to get from going down this path, it would be a much easier sell.
Sure. And lastly, of course, as has kind of been alluded to, if this were to go through, again, it's its own entity, but we need to find a way to have a pretty chummy relationship with them. I mean, they're their own thing, and I mean, do we know Coupeville and the Port of Coupeville and the City of Coupeville? I know that their borders expand way past the city. Do they have any sort of regular meetings, communication? How do those two entities communicate on any sort of regular basis, or do they? Do we know?
We don't know.
So there is a monthly meeting, the Council of Governments and the Port of Coupeville's there, along with the town of Coupeville's mayor, and Oak Harbor's there, and the South End is there. We're all, yeah, and the Port of South Whidbey, we're all there, and there are conversations. And they're very amicable discussions about what we're doing to move things forward for the entire island and Island County, so.
Because I don't mind giving up control of the marina for the good of the marina. It's not a control thing, but certainly we open up this boat, we unleash this animal, so to speak, and that we'd like to know that the visions that we've been kind of talking about are really taken into considerations by whoever those new commissioners are.
Yeah, and that's what your Council of Governments meeting is about on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Did you want to say, Chris, were you saying something? I'm sorry. Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Mayor Pro Tem, I can't see you, or Councilmember Wiesner, did you have anything else to add? Any other questions, comments? So really, this is our opportunity to give them some sense of direction on what you want them to come back with, and what I'm hearing you say, just to kind of recap to make sure, was the general consensus is that you guys want to take all of the possibility approach and pursue all avenues?
So just so I'm clear, you're talking about taking the avenue of implementing a B&O tax regardless of the outcome of the port? Because I would rather to hear, is that port going to happen or not? Because the B&O tax we can do relatively quickly, because that's not a formal vote. We can flip that switch quickly. What I don't want is for us to pursue the B&O tax, approve the B&O tax, and then the port goes through.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm asking you.
Sure.
The two of you said that you want to pursue all of the things that were presented, so.
So for me personally, I have no problem with having a discussion. What could that B&O tax look like? Can we be all ready? But I'm not for approving that B&O tax before we know the results of a port district.
Well, the one advantage of passing the B&O tax sooner rather than later is we'll start accruing the funds, and putting it away into a reserve for future use. But you know, there's pros and cons to both, you know, going to a port and going to B&O.
Sure, and
Yeah.
I get that. I still stand by my thoughts on that one.
Councilmember Wiesner, and then I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just quick like to respond to that. Yeah, I mean, when I say, you know, we need to proceed forward, you know, there's a discussion that needs to get back on track on the B&O tax, right? Before we kind of came out with not necessarily a dedicated purpose. If this is going to be the dedicated purpose, if it's going to be dedicated to the marina / parks, right? Because I think they're hand in hand, right? I think that discussion needs to at least take place, because the reality is we may find that we still get pushback on that may have to come off the table. And, you know, public input, you know, it's going to take a couple of months to get the public input on that B&O tax. And so I'm thinking there has to be some sort of a parallel universe. I agree with Councilmember Stuckey that we don't go voting things into place until we have a big picture, but we still don't know how the public feels about the B&O tax for this purpose yet. So we don't know if that's really an option yet, unless we want to just force it down everybody's throat. And so I think there's another set of discussions where we have to reapproach that B&O tax, get the public's input. I think that needs to be happening simultaneously while we're going back to DC and we're hitting up there. I think it has to be simultaneous to why we're thinking about other funding sources, whether it even be the general fund. And I think that needs to be happening while we continue to learn about ports, have the discussion about ports. I mean, we can never have too much public input on this, which means, you know, it can never take too long of a time, right, for the public input standpoint. From the public input standpoint, certainly, I think all those discussions need to continue at the forefront, including the discussions with the challenges we have with the marina. If we let this go to the back front and we say, well, this is just one of 5 or 6 items that are important to us, and I think we're going to lose some steam. I think we have to keep this conversation going, and I think we have to keep it going in all 4 areas, and that doesn't necessarily mean take action. But I don't think we're ready, even if we wanted to take action on any one of these 4. I think there's still a lot more discussion to be had, and I think there is still more input to be had from the citizens of the community as to whether or not those of us sitting up here are thinking right about what their feelings are about all of this.
So my only question is, I'm sitting here, and I'm going to be the one that says this because they're probably not. I don't feel like they're getting any direction here. Do you guys feel like you're getting direction?
It's a little murky.
Exactly. That's my point. So we're trying to move this forward. We've presented the information. What additional information is needed from the staff so that you guys can make a decision? That's what we're trying to give you. And we're just trying to partner with you and make that happen.
So if we brought forth an action item resolution, whatever it's going to be, that said, we are moving forward in the direction of pursuing a port, would you as a council support that? Like, we don't want to do that work if you're going to say, no, we're not ready yet. But then what are we ready to do? The B&O tax, we're starting the communication out to the business community for that, so that will be coming up as well. Or do you want a general approval that you as a council are saying, we want you to move in the direction of a port district? As you're doing that, we also want you to have the conversations with the business community about B&O and then come back to us with updates as you're moving through those processes. Because to bring on a consultant, we would be coming to you for that approval and that process, most likely.
I'm going to I will. Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead. I was going to call on you next.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember that the B&O tax, the one that we have in mind, is, I mean, I guess if the port district passed it, would overlap, but I just don't want to conflate the two. Those are two totally separate things, and if we do the B&O tax only on businesses that generate more than $5 million a year, David, refresh my memory, is that 26 businesses? I don't, if it's literally 2 dozen businesses, I don't see why we'd have to do this big giant public outreach. I think we should focus that energy towards educating people about the port district. So I'd say, my personal opinion, I'm only one vote for 7. move forward with the B&O tax. It will only affect like less than 30 businesses. We can certainly go and talk to them. It's only the businesses that make more than $5 million, $8 a year. So it's not going to affect anybody else. And then we also go full steam ahead on Port District promotion. That would be my preference. Again, I say all of the above. And you know what? If the Port District wins and we are just overflowing with money, we can always repeal the B&O tax later. It's not, we're not stuck with it forever. But the $800,000 that it will generate per year, that will barely cover the debt service on dredging the marina. And we have to dredge the marina. So, I mean, we need to start generating this income sooner than later. Can't wait.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
Okay, so at least for me, I'll try to be very clear. If there was something on the next agenda to approve taking the Port District to the voters, I'm for it. The B&O tax, I personally would not want to vote on until I knew the results of that. So by all means, I don't need more information to say, let's put this out to the voters. I'm okay with that, just to be clear.
Councilmember Arms.
You know, I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Stuckey, but the only problem is, by the time we put it on the ballot, and by the time we figure it out, if they're going to say yay or nay, then we've already missed the opportunity to have the B&O tax. And I think, as much as we don't want to do it, I think it's something we need to do. Then we have the funds if it all falls apart. But it's like anything, if we're not prepared and we don't get the okay with the port, we've lost 6 or 7 months, we've lost revenue, we don't get the okay from Washington, D.C., then we're pushing back. We've lost all that. So I kind of agree with Councilmember Heisen that doing the B&O tax, going with the port, I think is the way we should do it. And then we have that money in reserve if we're not going to get anything, because we don't know. And we're having all this stuff going on with the marina right now that we can't fund, and we're probably going to lose our insurance. And so where are we going to get it? We don't have it. So I think B&O tax, Port District, we go back, we ask the citizens, you know, about the port, put it on the ballot. I think that's where we should go.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Hey, Mayor. Yeah, I apologize if I wasn't clear enough, but I guess I'll put it a little more clear. I think the discussion on the B&O tax needs to get re-engaged, right? I think we need to continue to look at all other revenue sources in the city, which includes expanding revenue of the marina, which includes talking to the Navy about that additional land, which would give us upland racking, which would be an additional revenue source. I think that's the other, how do we contribute more to the general fund and maybe have the general fund contribute to the marina as part of the discussion. I think we need to be going back to DC this year, specifically very pointed with our requests surrounding the marina. And I think we need to continue to educate the public about what a port district could look like. Personally, myself, I don't think we would be ready for a port district vote until very late in next year from the education standpoint. With that said, I thought the same thing about the transportation benefit district, but we pulled that off in a matter of months and the people got behind it. So I certainly don't want to say that I have the thoughts of all the people in town as to how they would. I just think that a port district is fairly complicated and there is a fairly lengthy education process to get people, because I think people come into it with such a preconceived idea that it is marina. And I think people need to start understanding that a port is an economic development tool. The marina would just be kind of the reason to create that economic development tool. That's what I think. Is that clear? I mean, it's the same thing. It's all four things, right? But I'm trying to be a little more clear in that direction for you.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you.
Right, and I think we're all in agreement that I don't think anyone's thinking this is going to happen before November of next year, but we have to start working towards that now.
Right, it has to be all four things at once.
Well, right, yeah, but I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah. Anything else on this topic? I can't see Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
I say we move forward with pursuing what the Port District's going to look like in detail, right? To get ready and prepared to put it on a ballot. And I'm kind of, I just want clarification. The B&O that we're talking about is to offset costs for the dredging or offset cost of potential future maintenance and repair or revitalization or rebuild or whatnot, right?
I mean, the B&O can be used for whatever is decided to be used for. I mean, primarily, if the cost of taking out the loan would be about 800,000, and the B&O would bring in about 800,000, so that would pretty much match up with that. But there's also the current expenses that we're spending on the current loan, which is going to mature next year. So that'll free up some money that the marina can use for operations and other improvements as well. So
The short answer is it would be all of the above of what you asked for. I mean, it would just be depend upon how we decided to pay it out and what we would use it for, depending upon other things that happened as well. But it could be used for all of those things. It's a fail-safe for us, though, in the event
Okay.
that the bond or the Port District isn't successful. But I don't think that's going to be the key either. I think if we all get behind this, if we all work diligently, and we show a very good vision for what this, and we stress the economic driver that's behind this, I think it will be very successful. We don't need to make the focus the marina.
No, we shouldn't make the focus the marina. It needs to be the economic goals of North Whidbey at this point.
That's correct.
We have to get the Oak Harbor language out of it if we're going to push a port district, because there's just as much population surrounding us as there is inside the city limits for the most part, relatively, and we're asking them to pitch in to be a part of this port district. What's their value? What are they going to gain from it? And the marina needs to be if we divide it up in numbers, 1/5 of 5 things, right? And the focus needs to be on the other piece of it. So I agree with moving forward with the port. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem about getting started on the B&O as well to help offset costs.
Yes, Councilmember Arms.
Well, and I think that's what the city had, if you read some of these comments that they sent for the plan that we listened to, a lot of that is they want to see something different in the city. We don't have a vision and a plan. This is our opportunity to have a vision and a plan that we've never had. This will be monumental for our city. You know, people will look at it and say, we want to come and see this city, instead of what are we coming down to, the downtown and what, or the boat comes in and whatever.
See me and Jim.
That's right. But we'll set that up. But I think it will be a vision that will be so monumental that it will really help everything that we need to do for our city. So I think that's where we should go.
Thank you. All right, are we done?
Did we help?
Yes, she did, very much so.
You're not just saying that, are you?
No,
I'll ask you,
No,
I'll
Thank
ask
you,
later.
Chris and Brian. Thank you.
We'll hang you over the thing.
All right, last but certainly not least, we have Public Works procurement policy updates, and here to talk to us about that is our Central Services Manager, Sandra Place.
Thank you, everybody. Today, good afternoon. Today, we're going to talk about the Purchasing Policy and Procedures Update. It's a continuation from our April discussion. Are you rolling? Are you driving, or am I? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so just a quick reminder that our purchasing policy and manual is is designed for the residents, city council, and the city administrative staff to be able to receive the maximum value for each of our tax and utility dollars, that we expend them, and we assure fiscal responsibility. The second part is that we are having best practices for our employees. So it gives us charts inside so our employees can follow it and be able to safeguard our city. And the last time we did update it was May 17th of 2022. So it is time to update it. Last April, I looked back at our workshop discussion, and I also looked back at my notes, and City Council, and I quote said, "I just don't want to throw numbers out. So please bring back some numbers that we felt were needed." So that's why I'm here today. One of the pieces I'm here today. So the 4 objectives is to increase the authority level, to be more effective and more efficient, to standardize our authority amounts across the board to help our staff, to update policies and procedures to align with new legislative outcomes that have happened in 2023 and 2024, and to update the grant process. Just a reminder, we have these 5 types of procurement. We got public works. Now, when we say public works, don't remember it's not public works, the department. It's public works as in repairs and thank you, construction. Then we have goods, equipment, supplies, and materials. We have purchase services, which are those routine items. Personal services, which are intellectual in nature but do not apply to A&E, which is architectural and engineering. So I took our chart that you've seen several times before, and as it was suggested, is to show you again what we're currently at, and what we're proposing. And what we're proposing is to just double the amount this time around. So on a director level, if they have budget capacity, they would have $10,000 to approve up to that amount. And then we would go down up to the next level between 10 and 100,000, doubling that 50,000, the mayor, the city administrator, or the designee. And then after the 100,000, we would be bringing it back to city council for approval. So that's for materials, supplies, and equipment, including installation, including shipping, including sales tax. Then we go to the personnel services. And again, this one's a little weird because it's at 30,000, and I think I've mentioned before, we've actually had to drop it to 10,000 at one point. We brought it back up to 30,000, and it's really confusing to people because we have a 5, we have a 30, we have a 50, and so what I would like to just propose is that we bring it all up to the 100,000 level, so it's very standardized across the board. And so again, that would give the mayor, city administrator, or the designee authority to approve up to the 100,000. Then it would be brought back to council for both personal services and purchase services. And I just want to remind council as well that we did do some comparisons against other cities, and that falls really, that aligns with a lot of them, such as like Stevens, Bainbridge, Stanwood, Mukilteo. Anacortes is lower at 45, Poulsbo's at about 75. So it falls in line with what a lot of other cities are doing. And then we come to the big ticket items, the small works roster, the formal bid process. These are the ones that are over 350,000. These are the big ticket items. Again, I'd like to propose that we align to the 100,000 for the mayor or designee. Over 100,000 would be brought back to city council. Once again, this does not prohibit the use of the bidding procedure. We're still going to do our due diligence. We still have to make sure we're following those policies to be able to be competitive. This just gives the authority to be more efficient because there's not as much administration time, as administration cost. It helps in emergency situations. So it's just kind of bringing us up to a new level that we've never been to at that 100,000 level. I've not seen it in my 28 years here. So. And so that was the first part. That's the authority level part that I want to talk about. The second part is these are all of the bills that have gone through the House and the Senate to be able to change some of the procurement that we're dealing with these days. And this is what you're going to see when we bring forward the purchasing policy and procedures, is these things are going to be updated, as well as if council is comfortable updating the authority level. So the small works roster, huge differences in this one. I actually really love this one because it now implements a process where there's not favoritism to certain vendors. You used to have to do 3 or 5. Now it's you either contract with one and there's a huge procedure to go with, or you being everybody. And that gives everybody the opportunity on the playing field to be able to solicit. We just went to a procurement class last Thursday, and we asked about, because sometimes there's 100 people on those lists if you're using the roster. And that's a lot of emails coming back at you if people are interested. A lot of the other agencies were saying they're probably getting 10 out of that 100. So it's not too bad, but that really was, kind of like an aha shock of 100 emails is a lot. And if you have to go through 100 bids, it's a lot of work. So very competitive, but a lot of work. And so then They also they improve the transparency through centralized data collection. So once you Bing everybody, it's all on the rosters. You can see everything that's happening. And also, if you decide to do the direct one, which is just going to one, you have to notify everybody. You also have to rotate them. There's a lot of process that's involved, which it should be. You know, it's not just picking your favorite vendor or picking your favorite consultant. There needs to be a competitive process. It also talks about new businesses. There's some qualifications and some new certifications, and that helps bring those small businesses that haven't had that opportunity. It brings them into the playing field as well. And so those are all part of our city procurement goals, is being more inclusive to all of our business, regardless of what sizes they are. And this House bill, this is the big one. Apprenticeship utilization has been expanded. So as of July 1st, anytime we have a public works project that goes over $2 million, we have to make sure that they are doing a good faith effort to do 15% of their total labor hours using apprenticeship staff. This is really good because it does bring back the trade. It's helping bring trade back into the system. But at the same time, you have to just make sure you're following it. And there's also a lot more paperwork that goes along with this. So in July 1st of 2026, that 2 million goes down to 1.5, and then in July of 28, it goes down to 1 million. Municipalities just got added on. Schools have already been doing this, library districts and all that. This is just new for municipalities as of this year. So you'll see that in the new updated policy as well. They've increased the project limits. This is super important for the city of Oak Harbor because we've used this twice now, one for the windmill and one for the angel artwork. The limit was 35,000. They've now upped it to 75,000. What I also love about this is that they specifically told you that it's 75,000 in the year. It's not per contract, it's in the year. So you can split it as much as you want, but the city can only give 75,000 in the year. It must be 2 times the amount. The benefit must be 2 times the amount. We know this, and we know that there's also $2 per resident, whichever is greater. So this is really fun because, like I said, we were contemplating, is it 1, is it 2, is it per contract? So this is what they did, is they really specified what it was for. And then they, in House Bill 1621, they increased some standard limits for public works projects. For instance, bidding was required up to $7,500. Now it's $40,000. There's some things about public works contracts where the single craft is $155,000. It jumps up to $150,000. So they've just done some more increases. We've seen that before in 2022 when we did that last policy. So this is just another one where we're going to standardize per the legislative actions into our new policy. These ones, I'm going to tell you, I'm not as educated as I want to be on these because they're brand new to me. I don't know that we in the city are going to use them, but we're going to put them in there just in case, just like we put in the community one when we didn't have it in there, just in case it comes up. But this one is just adding in some, it amends it, which it lets us pursue performance-based contracts for water, energy, conservation, solid waste reduction, and energy equipment. Again, I'm going to put more details in the policy because I don't really know how that's going to apply to us and how that procedure is going to look. It's one of those brand new ones for me as well. And then the last one is just expanding the contract registration requirements for plumbing, elevator, and electricians. When they're subs, the contractor has to guarantee that they are responsible by being licensed and certified. That's on the contractor, and previously to that, that was not in there. So that just adds that on with that House Bill 5088. And lastly, Sabrina set us up really good for this one at the last workshop. It was just talking about really streamlining the process, removing the pre-approval from council if there's no matching funds, if there's no long-term commitment, and it's already budgeted. So that just lets us go straight to the process of applying because there's no obligation, and we can go through that process. And then, of course, it always comes back to council. If there is matching funds, long-term commitment, or no budget, then it must go to council first for approval. And then the details will be given at that point. So that's that part of the grant process that you'll see as well that's in the policy. So that's the update.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Stuckey?
First, if we could get those slides also sent
course.
to us. I mean, there's a lot of numbers thrown out really quickly, and so.
Sure.
But let me just, ask then, I'm speaking obviously in general terms, not about a specific mayor or anything like that. I want to make that clear. So like when I saw $100,000 comprehensive plans, let's just say, we talked about doing an economic development plan, and let's say we had not been talking about it. Under that, could the mayor just decide, I think our city's going to do an economic development plan at $60,000, I'm going to do it. Under these rules, could he do that without talking to us to do it? Like, I don't think they would, but could they?
Yeah, yes, that is potential if it's only a one-year contract. If it goes over 1 year, of course, it goes back to council. But yes, that is a possibility. And that's what we do every time we increase those limits, is we're taking on that. It does not, though, I will tell you, like commodities, the protected commodities like tech and vehicles, that has still been determined that goes to council, unless council decides that they want it to fall under that as well. But we've always had those where they come back to council, regardless of what the limit is.
But also keep in mind that the city council approves the budget appropriation authority for every department and all those line items, so that just like now, for an expenditure to go through, it had to have been put there and approved by the city council, when they approve the budget or a budget amendment or so on.
That's a great point. That's above that base budget is, you've already been recognized that in the budget process that we are going to do this, or we are going to do that, or we plan to do that. So that's a great point. Thank you, David.
Okay. I mean, I'll need to see those before I have more thoughts on the exact total. I don't want to get too nitty gritty, but I want to make sure I need more time to disseminate. And then secondly, when it came to the grants, assuming, and we're 100% sure there's no obligation or anything like that, I'm all for just go for it. I mean, if there was a match, if there was other if there was no match and there was possible other implications that, staff thought, well, maybe we want to bring this to them, that would be great. But otherwise, I'm all for it. If there's no match, there's no commitment, there's no nothing, why not try?
Yeah. And I'm confident in our grant process and our grant administrator that she would totally do that.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Is there a level of grant, like match? Like if it's a de minimis amount, like $500, or is there, like?
I do not have that in there, but we could add that in.
I'm just
I do not
curious.
have that in there,
You know,
but that
because-
is a
because I
possibility,
understand
anything over.
going for
whatever.
like a firefighter grant or the cops grant, where, you're going to be on the hook to have these employees for, quite a long period of time, which would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a major commitment. But if we're getting like a $12,000 grant and there's like a 5% or a 10% match, I'm just curious. So, yeah.
We don't have that currently, but you could put that in there. We do have that long-term commitment, though, because we have seen that in the past where it was a grant for staffing, and it did span several years.
Sure.
And that's a liability for us.
Yeah, and so something like that would want to be,
Yeah.
I still think if there's any financial commitment, I'd like it to go through us. But you're right, there is stuff for staffing and stuff like that should go through us too. But if it's something that would have no impact, why not?
Thank you.
Councilmember Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my thoughts, I was around back in the days when we had I wasn't part of the reduction side. I was part of the side who said $10,000, that's ridiculous, because the reality is it was causing a bottleneck, and it was causing an issue. But with that said, I'm a firm believer at looking at these numbers on a regular basis and making sure that the buying capacity of staff and the mayor, are where they need to be within the economy. I will just honestly say, just my general thought is I have a problem with tripling it. Just because the economy hasn't tripled,
You're
right?
referring to the 30,000 council.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for trying to level it out, make more sense, so it's not all over the place. I, in my mind, would think, where you've got those $100,000 figures, that those could be $50,000 figures. That's almost a 50% increase. And of course we've, that 30,000, was there before the 10,000, and we took it back from the 10,000 to 30,000. So we really didn't progress anything forward. So I think a 50% jump's appropriate. A 300% jump, I just have a little bit of issue with. So we can talk more about that. I guess, the feedback I'd want from you is how many times would 50,000 be a obstacle, right? Because that, you know, ultimately that's the reason we had to go from 10 to 30, because it was ridiculous. It was hamstringing
It was.
the city, and I don't want to hamstring the city by saying, okay, you know, we need to keep, but there is a check and balance. Council's here for a check and balance for a reason. And I just feel that $50,000 is a number that I'd be more comfortable with. But I'd certainly,
That's valid. Thank
I'm
you.
certainly willing to hear any feedback on that as to if that would be a detriment or not. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Arms.
Well, I think partly one reason why we increased it too is we had the incident with the marina. We had the electric go out, we needed something. Luckily, everything was done in a timely manner. But just say it was the wrong time, we needed to have that money that you could authorize right now and make sure without having to come to us and then going back. That, I think, is one reason why it's up so high, is because we had, what was it, 60 or 60,000 or something like that, I don't know. But that was one of the things that we had to consider when the marina went down with the electric. So I think that's why we wanted to increase it, because that is big expenditure, so just my take.
And Timmy, could you please put the charts back up? I wanted to clarify something too. There's only one of the sections that has the 30,000 that did go up triple. The other ones are double. They're already at 50. Which is, but we also have inflation. We have a lot of huge, costs have increased. So I will throw that out there as well. But, again, I think I like to stay as consistent as we can for staff, because having a 10, 30, 100, 75, 80, whatever, it is confusing for staff. So if we could just kind of standardize things, that would be nice. Whichever level you're comfortable with doing, of course. But again, the first one, this one here, just to clarify, we're at 5,000 right now for directors, going to the 10. So are we comfortable with letting directors with budget capacity? You know, there's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. And then there's the next part where, are we talking, the mayor already can sign up to 50,000. So do we stay there, or are we going to go between 50 and 100,000? I guess that's the kind of feedback that I'm hoping for. Is we said every 2 years-ish, we would bring back and look at to see what we need. And staff is saying, it's time to move it up a little bit, you know.
And I guess I would throw back to you, how often with the $50,000 current that we have, do we find ourselves in a situation where we're going, oh, darn, we wish we had 60,000 buying, capacity in this particular, this is real inconvenient, going back to council asking for $60,000 because we don't have, so, I mean, that's the question,
yeah.
right? Are we doing this because there's a need, or are we doing this just because we feel it's time?
I think that that's a great question, and I think what I would fall back on in my answer would be, what is most effective and efficient? Obviously, having the higher limits are more efficient. It's less time going back to council. It takes several weeks, if not months, to get back to council.
But at the same time, there's a reason
there
council's
is.
involved in that, right? And
100%.
to look our citizens in the eye, when we're experiencing 3 to 4% a year inflation, and then double, right? And say, well, we need double the buying power because of inflation. That's not a, reasonable answer,
So,
right?
Councilmember, one thing I will say that, this may or may not help, but one of the things that Sandra and Katie have done that I think has been very helpful in procurement, because I sign off on some of these, is they are adding a description and a reasoning for why we're doing it. So they're being very clear about that we went to council on this date, because for you to know, sometimes you guys approve something, and in the time it takes to process that item, it's 2 months later, it's, 3 weeks later. And so I think what's really nice about that, and even in these instances like emergencies or things like that, they're listing for us very clearly, for record keeping's sake, this is why we're doing this and how we're doing it. So there would be some very clear documentation that tells us exactly why that was done. So I don't know if that helps alleviate some of the concern, but I think it's a nice to have, because when we started talking about it, I said it would be nice to have that reference in the future as to why we did this and what rules we followed to address that.
And I guess at the very least, if we could at least bump the 30,000 to 50, would be standardization of everything. That would be lovely.
Yeah, I think that's
At the very least.
I think that's a no-brainer, and giving the mayor that additional authority is a no-brainer. But like I said, just the triple just doesn't. I don't know, unless there's a real reason, or some some real specifics where it's really caused a major inconvenience,
Yeah, I can't
just
say
don't
that
know
there
that I can
has.
sign
I
off on
think-
doing it just to do it.
Yeah, I
So-
think we do our best to just get it done. Yeah.
Hey, Sandra, can I ask you a quick question on the grants one?
Yes.
And maybe address this with mayor and council. So an example is last week, the NOFO for the AFG grant that, allows us to buy equipment came out. The application date is due December 20th. So we basically have 6 weeks to decide what we want to get, write an application, come to council. There's always a 10% match to that, and we're actually going after a micro grant to try to make us a little more competitive. So we're talking about $75,000 for new radios. All of our radios are about 15, 20 years old. And so we're talking about a match of $7,500. And again, trying to get it to come back to council. I know we tried to do a firehouse sub-grant was $25,000 a couple months ago. There was no match with that, so that would help with this. But my question comes is, do we need to come to council for $7,500? And when we have 6 weeks, that's if we catch it right when they release it the first day of the NOFO. It's just such a short timeline that FEMA gives us on these fire
Well, my
grants. It makes it
general
really
thought on
difficult.
that is as a department head, I think you have $10,000 in spending capacity already, and my thought would be if it's a one-time match, and if we wanted to add some language, into that, but I mean, right now, as far as I know, you have a $10,000 spending capacity.
Except for the grant process prohibits it because there is a matching. So if if council wanted to say a matching up to $20,000 in our verbiage that we can change, he would be fine to go forward at the director's level because he doesn't have to take it back to council with a matching grant unless it gets to 20,000. So right now,
I would
our
think
policy does not allow
I would think
that.
there's a reasonable number out there somewhere that the department head should be able to, especially if it's a one-time match, and especially if that match is, say, less than 20% of the money received. I mean, if we're receiving a 80 to 20, I think it's a no-brainer. So I'd be okay with adding some sort of language in there to.
Because that actually
for
helps
some
the
sort of
efficiency of
capacity.
that matching grant then, yes. Mhm. Does that answer, yeah? Thanks, Chief, does that?
It does, yeah. That's the challenge
good
is
point.
we usually get about 6 weeks if we're lucky. So it's a quick turnaround time, and especially with the new requirements of getting stuff on the council agenda earlier. Just kind of makes it a little difficult for us. So we could have, a minimum amount of something that we could do would make our job a little easier.
Could it be something like more universal, like whatever, 20,000 or a 25% match, whichever is less, or whichever, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, we can totally add that.
Or something,
and-
because we don't want,
And bring it back to council.
because I don't want like a 25% match to end up being like 500,000 on it, you know what I mean? So
100%,
maybe
yeah.
whatever's, we could discuss whatever that threshold the council feels comfortable with, I guess.
And we do that with the change order. We do a percentage or what's less. So we could easily do that.
Yeah, it sounds like they're amenable to that, so.
Okay.
I just wanted to give Mayor Pro Tem a chance to weigh in here if she wanted to say anything. I can't tell. Oh, she's gone, okay. All right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, thank you,
Yes,
Sandra.
thank you for
Hearing
your time. I
nothing,
appreciate
we are
it.
adjourned. There's no further business.